She carried champagne through a room full of people who refused to see her. The Kang mansion in Manhattan was burning gold that night. Crystal, silk, money everywhere. Taylor Harrison, 24 years old, black, moved between the guests in a black maid's dress and a starched white apron. Her tray never tilted. Her smile never broke. She had served this house long enough to know which billionaires didn't tip and which ones grabbed. At the center of the room stood Kang So-jin, 32, the heir. A black dragon tattoo climbed his neck from beneath the open collar of a tailored black suit. They called him the boy nobody could refuse. Investors bowed. Socialites circled. His mother, Madame Hayrim, pushed Yuri Han closer to him every 5 minutes, diamonds glittering at her throat like bait. He drank. He laughed too loud. His friends slapped his back and dared him. Nobody tells you no, Seo-jin. Not in this city. Not in this family. So he raised his glass, eyes burning, and made a vow in front of 300 witnesses. I will marry the first woman who tells me no, and means it. The socialites laughed and played at refusing him. A pretty game, a safe game. Then Taylor walked past with a fresh bottle. He reached for it without looking. What she said next stopped the entire room. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The tray was heavier than it looked. Taylor Harrison adjusted her grip, 3 fingers under the silver edge, thumb steady along the rim, and crossed the marble floor of the Kang ballroom without spilling a single flute. 12 glasses of champagne, 12 guests waiting, none of them looking at her. She had counted the chandeliers once, on her first night in the mansion. 7, each one a constellation of cut crystal. Tonight they burned at full power, and the light caught the rim of her white apron, the white cuffs at her wrists, the white collar at her throat. Everything else about her was the uniform. Black dress, black stockings, black low-heeled shoes that did not click on the marble because she had learned, years ago, how to walk silently in a room where silence was the rule. A woman in emerald silk reached for a glass without looking at the tray. Taylor tilted the silver a 1/4 inch so the woman's manicured fingers found the stem on the first try. The woman did not say thank you. She did not say anything. She turned back to her conversation about a yacht in Majorca, and Taylor moved on. This was how the night worked. You became furniture that walked. You became the hand that appeared with what they needed before they had to ask. You became invisible by being too perfect to notice. She crossed the ballroom toward the East Arch, where the second wave of guests had gathered. A senator's wife, a Korean businessman with a face like polished stone, 2 men whose names she did not know but whose watches she had priced, automatically, the way she priced every wrist that passed her, 60,000, 40,000, the smaller one near the column, 80,000 at least. She did not mean to do it. The mind learned to measure what the world measured you against. A flute disappeared from her tray, then another, then a 4th. She kept her shoulders square, her chin level, her smile small and professional, the way Mrs. Park had taught her. A maid in this house did not grin. A maid in this house did not frown. A maid in this house was a clean line of neutral. Anything else was a stain. She circled the room twice before her tray was empty. Then she pivoted, headed back toward the service door behind the orchestra, and that was when she heard the laugh. It came from the upper gallery. Deep, short, not quite amused. She knew that laugh. She had heard it before, in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, when Mr. Kang So-jin came down for his black coffee, and the cook made the same joke about the weather that he never answered with words, only with that brief, almost laugh that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised everyone else. Taylor did not look up. She had learned not to look up. She slid through the service door, set the empty tray on the steel counter, and turned to the row of fresh trays already prepped by Huang, the head bartender, who nodded at her without smiling. "Same arch," Huang said. "Senator's wife already on her 3rd. Watch her." Got it. She picked up the new tray. 12 more flutes. Her wrist was beginning to remember the weight. That particular low ache between the bones that meant she had 4 more hours in front of her. 4 more hours. She could do 4 more hours. She had done worse. Back into the ballroom. The orchestra had shifted into something slower. a piece with cello in the foreground, and the guests had begun to drift the way they always drifted at this point in the evening. Closer to the dance floor, closer to each other, closer to the conversations that would matter later, when the champagne had done its work and the deals began. A man stepped backwards into her path without looking. Her tray dipped. 2 flutes started to slide. She caught them with her free hand, fingers spread under the bowls, the cold of the glass shocking against her palm, and she did not spill a drop. The man did not turn around. He had not noticed. A woman behind him did. She was older, 60 maybe, in pearls and pale gold, and her eyes met Taylor's for 1 full second before sliding past with the practiced indifference of her class. Not unkind. Not kind either. Just done with looking. Taylor straightened the tray, kept walking. She thought about her grandmother, the way she did when nights got long. Her grandmother had cleaned houses in Atlanta for 41 years. Her grandmother had taught her how to fold a napkin so the crease ran true. Her grandmother had taught her to walk into a rich woman's house with her back straight because a bent back was a back you broke yourself. Her grandmother had died in February, in the small apartment in Harlem with the radiator that whistled, and Taylor had been there at the end, holding her hand, the only one in the room. The funeral had cost $6,000. Taylor had paid it. She had paid the headstone too, and the back rent, and the cremation costs for the cat that had outlived her grandmother by 3 days, because the cat had been her grandmother's last warm thing, and Taylor was not going to let it end up in a city bin. 6,000 became 8,000. 8,000 became 11. 11,000 was the credit card she still carried in her left pocket, the one she never used, the one she touched sometimes, through the fabric of her uniform, to remember why she was here. The Kang mansion paid better than any house she had ever worked, better than the hotel on Park, better than the Upper East Side townhouses with the cameras in every hall. Mr. Kang paid in cash on Friday, and the cash was always exact, and the cash was always more than she had made the week before at the hotel. She did not know how much of that was kindness and how much of that was discretion. She had stopped asking. She crossed the room again, emptied another tray, crossed back. In the corridor between the service door and the kitchen, she stopped for one breath. One. She let her shoulders drop half an inch. She rolled her wrist once. She did not lean on the wall, because Mrs. Park had a sense for walls being leaned on, and Taylor had not been caught yet, and did not plan to start tonight. Then she straightened, picked up a fresh tray, and went back in. The senator's wife was on her 4th flute. Taylor passed her without offering a 5th. The woman noticed. The woman frowned. The woman did not say anything, because the man beside her was already saying something more important, and Taylor was already 3 steps past. She circled the dance floor. A young woman in pale blue stopped her with a tap on the wrist. "Sweetie," the young woman said, voice loose with champagne. "Where's the bathroom?" "Down the east hall. 2nd door on the left. There's an attendant inside." The young woman blinked. "You speak so well." Taylor smiled the small smile. "Thank you, ma'am. 2nd door on the left." The young woman drifted off. Taylor's smile did not move. The flutes on her tray did not move. Inside, in the place where she kept things that could not be said, a small clean line of fury formed, neat as a paper cut, and she folded it away and kept walking. "You speak so well." She had heard that one before. She would hear it again. There was a way to take a sentence like that. Hold it, look at it, decide it was not yours to carry, and put it down. Her grandmother had taught her that too. She passed the orchestra. She passed the buffet. She passed the long table where Madame Kang Hae Rim sat with 3 other women, all of them in hanboks of different colors, all of them with the same posture, all of them with the same low, quiet authority. Madame Kang did not look up at her either, but Madame Kang, Taylor had noticed, did not look up at anyone. Madame Kang made the world come to her. Taylor kept walking. Near the bar at the far end, a cluster of men in black tuxedos had formed around something. A bottle, a bet, a story. She did not look at them directly. She was trained not to look. But the cluster shifted, briefly, and through the gap she saw him. Kang Seo-jin. He was leaning back against the bar with one elbow propped on the polished walnut, a glass of something amber in his left hand, his right hand loose at his side. His tuxedo fit him the way a tuxedo was supposed to fit a man, like the suit had been waiting for his shoulders all its life. The top 2 buttons of his white shirt were undone. The base of the dragon tattoo on his neck showed black and red above the collar, the bottom of one scaled curl, the suggestion of a body that rose and disappeared into the white linen. He was laughing at something one of the men had said. It was the same short laugh she had heard from the gallery. He did not look drunk. He did not look sober either. He looked like a man who was watching his own party from inside his own party, 2 inches removed. His eyes shifted. Found her. Held. Taylor felt the held in her wrist before she felt it anywhere else. The tray went still. She had been about to take a step. She did not take it. 1 full second passed in which Kang So-jin looked at her across 40 feet of ballroom, and she looked back because she had not had time to remember not to. Then she remembered. She dropped her eyes. She stepped. The tray moved with her. The flutes did not spill. She did not look at him again for the next 20 minutes. But she felt him not looking at her either, which was its own kind of looking, and she walked the room with her spine very straight and her smile very small, and the small clean line of fury from the young woman in pale blue, folded away properly now, useful, sharpening her. She thought, without meaning to, of 3 mornings ago. She had been in the upstairs hallway with the cart, polishing the brass handles of the library doors. He had come up the stairs in a charcoal suit, no tie, paper in his hand. He had stopped at the top of the stairs because Mrs. Park was already there, and Mrs. Park had her hand on the shoulder of Mira, the second-floor maid, and Mira's eyes were red. Taylor had kept polishing. She had not turned her head. But she had heard. She broke the vase, Mrs. Park had said. The blue one, from the second cabinet. A pause. Then his voice, quiet, almost bored. Which vase? The one your mother brought from Seoul. A longer pause. Then he had said, Is anyone hurt? No, sir. Then there is no problem. Mrs. Park had started to say something else. Madame Kang's name. The price of the vase. He had cut her off with 1 word. Enough. He had walked past them, past Taylor, into the library. The door had closed. Mira had cried quietly for 30 seconds and then stopped and gone back to work. The cart had moved on. Taylor had not been supposed to hear. She had heard anyway, and she had filed it, the way she filed everything, in the place where she kept the small, clean lines that mattered. There was more. 2 weeks before that, in the kitchen at 5 in the morning, Bok-soon the cook had been on the phone with her son's school. The son had a fever. The son needed antibiotics. The antibiotics were expensive because the insurance was bad. Bok-soon had hung up and pressed her forehead against the steel counter for 1 breath. Then she had straightened and gone back to the eggs. That Friday, Bok-soon's pay envelope had contained an extra $500. No note, no name, just the cash. Bok-soon had cried into the dish towel for 1 full minute before she put the envelope in her bra and finished the morning service. Taylor had been in the pantry. Taylor had seen the envelope go in. Taylor had seen the cry. And Taylor had seen, 2 hours later, Kang So-jin come down for his coffee, accept the cup from Bok-soon's hands, look at her face for 2 seconds longer than usual, and ask in his quiet voice, Is your son better? Bok-soon had nodded. He had nodded back. He had drunk his coffee. He had left. Nobody had ever spoken about the envelope. Taylor folded that one away too. She had been folding things about Kang So-jin for almost a year now. The way he opened the back door for the delivery boy in the snow. The way he had once knelt on the marble to retrieve an earring a woman had dropped and handed it back without a word. The way he sometimes stood in the garden at first light, alone, with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at nothing. She had folded each one carefully into a pocket of her mind she did not visit often, because visiting that pocket was dangerous, and Taylor Harrison did not do dangerous. Tonight she could feel that pocket, full and warm against her ribs. She kept walking. The orchestra changed pieces. A waltz now. The dance floor filled. She watched feet for a moment, the patent leather, the silk shoes, the dyed-to-match satin pumps, and then she lifted her eyes back to tray height and kept moving. Huang found her near the kitchen door. Senator's wife is sitting now. Don't refill her. Got it. Madame Kang asked for water. Still, no ice. I'll bring it. Not you. Mira. Madame Kang asked for Mira. Taylor nodded. Understood. Huang hesitated, which was unusual for Huang. She also asked who you were. Taylor's hand on the tray did not move. Who? Madame Kang. Huang's eyes flicked away, then back. She asked your name. And you said. I said Taylor Harrison. Thank you. She didn't say anything after, just looked at you, then went back to her guests. Thank you, Huang. He nodded and slipped past her. Taylor stood for one breath at the steel counter. Then she picked up a fresh tray and went back in. She did not let herself feel the question. The question had teeth. The question would slow her down. She filed it next to the other small clean things and walked. In the ballroom, the dance floor had thickened. The orchestra had moved into the second waltz of the night, and the guests who had not danced the first one were dancing this one. She wove between them with the tray held high, the way Mrs. Park had taught her, elbows in, shoulders square. A man's elbow caught her hip. She absorbed it without spilling. She did not look at him. Another man, a foot in front of her, laughed too loud at a woman's joke. The woman's smile did not reach her eyes. Taylor noted it without meaning to and moved on. She emptied her tray near the south windows. The view through the glass was Manhattan at night, the river silver, the bridge a string of light, the city a thing too big to belong to anyone, and somehow belonging to the people in this room anyway. She did not look at it long. She had learned a long time ago that the city through the windows of the Kang mansion was a different city than the one outside her own apartment in Inwood. Two cities, one window. She walked away from the window. A woman in a gold dress stepped backwards into Taylor's tray. The flutes tilted, champagne spilled, 2 drops landed on the woman's wrist, 3 on the floor, none on the dress. The woman turned with her mouth open and her eyes hard. Are you blind? I'm sorry, ma'am. Let me get a cloth. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Taylor looked at her. Same small smile, same neutral mouth. The woman's wrist had a diamond bracelet on it, 4 rows. The clasp turned wrong because she had put it on herself in a hurry. Taylor noticed and did not say. What's your name? Taylor, ma'am. Taylor. I'll be telling Mrs. Park about Taylor. Yes, ma'am. You should be more careful in a room like this. Yes, ma'am. The woman snapped a finger at a server 2 steps away and demanded a fresh glass. The server brought it. The woman turned her back on Taylor, without releasing her from the look. Taylor crouched. She set the tray on the marble. She took the white linen cloth from her apron pocket, the one she kept folded into a small square for exactly this kind of moment, and she wiped the 3 drops off the marble in 3 clean strokes. She did not wipe the woman's wrist. The woman had not asked. She stood. She picked up the tray. She walked. Mrs. Park was waiting by the service door with her arms folded. What happened? A guest stepped back into the tray. I apologized. Was anything broken? No. Was anything stained? No. Mrs. Park studied her for 2 full seconds. Mrs. Park was 62 years old and had run the Kang household for 19 of those years and had eyes that missed nothing. Go to the kitchen, take 5 minutes, drink water, come back. I'm fine. Go. Taylor went. In the kitchen, the air was different. The air was steam and garlic and the low percussion of metal on metal. Boksoon was at the stove with her back turned, working a pan of something dark and fragrant. 2 prep cooks moved around her in a choreography that did not need words. The clock above the door said 10:47. Taylor went to the sink. She turned the cold tap. She let the water run over the inside of her wrists, both wrists, 1 full minute. The ache between the bones dropped by half. Her grandmother had taught her that one too. Cold water on the inside of the wrist when the body started to lie to you. Boksoon spoke without turning. You okay? I'm okay. Who was it? Gold dress, by the south window. Boksoon turned the pan once. That one is married to a man who lost $40 million last month. She is meaner this month than last. Taylor almost smiled. She turned the tap off. She dried her wrists on the towel by the sink and folded the towel back the way Boksoon liked it folded. Thank you, Boksoon. For what? For talking to me like a person. Boksoon snorted. Don't get sentimental. Go work. Taylor went. In the corridor, she passed Mira, who was carrying a silver water pitcher with both hands and looked terrified. Mira was 19. Mira had been in the house 6 weeks. Taylor stopped her with one touch on the elbow. Madame Kang asked for still, no ice. The pitcher is correct. Walk slowly. Set it on her right side, not her left. Don't pour unless she lifts the glass first. Mira nodded fast. Right side, not left. Don't pour. You'll be fine. Thank you. Taylor watched her go for 2 steps. Then she picked up her own tray from the steel counter, where Huang had refilled it, and she went back into the ballroom. The waltz had ended. The dance floor had cleared. The woman in the red dress was standing near the bar, alone, her hand on Kang So-jin's forearm in the way women put a hand on a forearm when they wanted everyone to see whose forearm it was. So-jin was not looking at her. He was looking at the empty dance floor as if he were still on it. Taylor crossed behind the orchestra. She did not look at the bar. By the service door she paused again. One breath. One. A footman she did not know caught her eye from across the corridor and lifted his chin in the small private nod the staff used among themselves when a night was getting heavy. Taylor returned it. The footman moved on. She thought about her shift in numbers, because numbers were the safest place to think. 4 hours done, 4 hours left, 12 trays an hour, 48 more trays, 576 more flutes. Her wrist would survive, her feet might not. The shoes she was wearing were the second pair she had bought from her last paycheck, because the first pair had developed a crack in the heel, and the second pair was almost broken in but not quite. The seam on the right shoe was beginning to rub at the bone of her ankle. She had felt the rub start an hour ago. She had 3 hours left before the rub became a blister. A blister she could handle. A blister was a small, clean line. She did not see Kang So-jin watching her from the upper gallery. She did not see Madame Kang Hae-rim, 2 tables away, lift her eyes one slow fraction of an inch and follow her son's gaze across the room until it landed on the back of the maid's neck, and then lift her water glass and take one careful sip with the look of a woman who had just confirmed a thing she had suspected for some time. Taylor pushed through the service door, set the empty tray down, and rolled her wrist once. Huang slid a fresh tray across the steel. "How many more rounds?" Taylor said. 6, maybe 7. Got it. She picked up the tray. And from the ballroom, through the half-open door, she heard a voice she did not yet know. A woman's voice, light, cool, expensive. Say her name, only it was not her name. It was the name of someone she had never met, said in a way that made the air change. "Seicho-jin-ah," the voice said. "You promised me one dance tonight." Taylor did not stop. She straightened the tray. She walked back into the room. The woman in the red dress was already moving toward the dance floor, one slender hand extended, her smile arranged exactly the way a smile was arranged when it had been practiced in a mirror. Kang So-jin had not moved from the bar. He was looking at the woman in red. He was answering her. He was setting his glass down, but just before he stepped forward to take her hand, his eyes flicked once, fast, across the room, and found Taylor Harrison again, standing very still by the east arch, with a tray of 12 untouched flutes of champagne, watching him without meaning to, the small clean line in her ribs no longer folded. He looked at her for one full second, then he turned to the woman in red and took her hand and walked her onto the dance floor. Taylor lowered her eyes to the tray. She started walking. She did not stop walking for the rest of the hour, but the pocket against her ribs was open now, and she could not close it back. She crossed the marble with the tray held high. She did not look at the dance floor. She did not look at the woman in red. She did not look at the man in the black tuxedo with the dragon climbing his neck. She looked at the tray. 12 glasses, 12 guests, 4 more hours. Her wrist held steady. The seam of her right shoe rubbed against the bone of her ankle. She kept walking. Madame Kang Hae-rim watched her son from the top of the marble staircase. She had not moved for 9 minutes. She had counted. Her hand rested on the cold banister, the jade ring on her right finger catching a slice of chandelier light, and she let the count steady her before she came down. Seo-jin stood near the fireplace. A glass of vodka hung in his fingers like an afterthought. He was laughing at something one of his friends said, but Hae-rim could tell from the way his jaw set between laughs that he was not actually listening. She knew that jaw. She had given him that jaw. She descended one step at a time. Yuri Han was already moving toward him from the other side of the room. Her wine-dark dress moved with her like it had been trained to. The slit at her thigh opened and closed in time with her steps, and 3 different men turned their heads as she passed. She did not look at any of them. She had only ever needed to look at one man tonight, and she was almost there. Hae-rim reached the bottom of the staircase and intercepted her son first. Walk with me, she said quietly in Korean. Seo-jin set the vodka glass on a passing tray without looking. Taylor was carrying that tray. The glass landed with a soft clink between two full flutes. Taylor's wrist absorbed the weight without a tremor. She kept walking. Hayrim noticed. She noticed the maid's wrist, and the maid's straight back, and the way her son had set the glass down without looking, because he already knew the tray would be there. She filed all three observations away, then she turned her son toward the long corridor that led to the private library. "Mother," Seo-jin said in English, "I have guests. Your guests will survive 30 seconds without you. Walk." He walked. In the library, she did not sit. She did not let him sit. She stood in front of the tall window that looked out over the snow-covered garden, and she spoke without turning around. "Yuri Han's father called me twice this week. He is being patient. Patience from that family is a finite resource. Do you understand what I am telling you?" "I understand what you are telling me. I just don't agree with it." "That is not the same as understanding." She turned now. The pearls at her throat caught the lamp on the desk and threw a soft line of light up under her chin. "You are 32. Your father was married at 26. Your grandfather was married at 23. The Kang name does not survive on charm and tattoos, Seo-jin. It survives on alliances. The Kang name has survived 400 years. It will survive one bachelor son. It will not survive a son who treats marriage like a joke. Her voice did not rise. It sharpened. Yuri is intelligent. She is patient. She is from a family that knows how to keep its mouth shut when our business is loud. You will not find a better matched woman in this city. Seo-jin looked at the window. Outside, the snow had started again, thin and slanted. He could see the reflection of his mother in the glass, and behind her reflection, the door of the library, and behind that door, the long corridor where, somewhere, a young woman in a black dress and white apron was carrying a heavy tray with a wrist that did not shake. "I will not propose to a woman because her father is patient. Then propose to her because I am not." Hayrim crossed to him. She was a foot shorter than he was. She reached up, not unkindly, and adjusted the lapel of his black suit jacket where it had crumpled slightly when he leaned on the mantel. Her fingers were thin and dry and cool. "Seo-jin, listen to me. I have buried your father. I have buried your uncle. I do not intend to bury this family. Give Yuri tonight. Talk to her. Dance with her once. Let the room see it. That is all I am asking for tonight. The rest can wait until morning." He looked down at his mother's hand on his lapel. "One dance. One dance. And do not drink any more of that vodka. You drink it like water and it shows on your face by midnight." She turned and left the library before he could answer. The door closed softly behind her. Seo-jin stayed at the window for a long moment, watching the snow find the boxwood hedges. Then he turned and walked back down the corridor to the ballroom and to the vodka. Yuri found him within the minute. She did not approach the way the other women had approached him all night. She did not laugh too loud or touch his sleeve or angle her shoulder against his. She came up beside him at the bar, ordered her own drink, a clean French gin with one ice cube, and waited until the bartender had walked away before she spoke. "Your mother just had a word with you." "My mother has a word with me every Saturday. Today is Friday." "Then she is early." Yuri smiled. It was a small smile, controlled at the edges, the kind of smile a woman practices in the mirror until it stops looking like practice. "Dance with me." "My mother already asked." "Then you owe her, not me. Dance with me anyway." He set the vodka down. He did not finish it. He held out his hand. Yuri took it without surprise, as if she had known for some time that he would hold it out, and they walked together to the polished section of floor where two other couples were already moving slowly to the string quartet. Taylor watched from the edge of the room. She did not mean to watch. She had crossed the ballroom with an empty tray on her way back to the kitchen for the next round of canapes, and the dance had happened in front of her in the 4 seconds it took to pass. Seo-jin's hand at the small of Yuri's back, Yuri's other hand on his shoulder. Their distance correct, their distance measured, their distance arranged. Taylor looked away. She kept walking. In the kitchen, she set the tray down on the steel counter and picked up the next one without speaking to anyone. And the cook, Mrs. Park, who had been with the family for 16 years, glanced up at her once and then glanced away, because Mrs. Park noticed things too. The dance ended. The quartet slid into the next piece. Yuri did not let go of Seojin's hand at the end of the dance the way etiquette suggested. She let her fingers slide along his palm as she stepped back. Slow, deliberate, the kind of touch a woman uses when she wants a man to feel it for the next 20 minutes. Seojin felt it. He also noticed that he had felt it. He did not like that he had noticed. He went back to the bar. The bartender, who had been hired for the night from a catering company in Midtown and who did not yet know which guests to refuse, poured him a second vodka without comment. Seojin drank half of it standing up. The room was warm. The chandeliers were too bright. His friends drifted over. There were 3 of them. Minho, who ran the family's shipping arm and laughed too loud at his own jokes. Daniel, who had grown up in Los Angeles and still spoke Korean with an American softness around the consonants. And Jae-woo, the youngest, 28, who treated Seojin like an older brother and a god in equal measure, and who had been waiting all night for the chance to stand in this exact circle with him. "So," Minho said, swirling his own glass. Yuri, Seojin agreed. "Your mother is happy?" "My mother is never happy. She is satisfied or she is plotting. Tonight she is plotting." The 3 friends laughed. Minho refilled his own glass from the bottle on the bar without asking the bartender. He was the kind of man who poured his own drinks at other men's houses, and Seojin had stopped minding it years ago. "Yuri is a good match," Daniel said carefully. He was the careful one. Her father owns half the docks in Busan. Her father owns a third of the docks in Busan. The other 2/3 belong to people who hate her father. Still, a third is a third. Seojin shrugged. He drank. Jae-woo, who had been waiting for his moment, leaned in. "Hyung, can I say something? You will say it whether I say yes or no. You're going to marry her." Seojin laughed, a single short laugh, and shook his head. "I'm going to dance with her one more time tonight because my mother asked. That is the entire contract." "You're going to marry her," Jae-woo said again, grinning now, emboldened by the vodka in his own hand. "You know why? Because nobody tells you no. Your mother told you to dance, and you danced. Yuri told you to dance, and you danced. You are going to keep saying yes until somebody puts a ring on the table, and then you'll say yes to that too. That's just how it works for you, Hyung. You haven't heard no since you were 9 years old." Minho laughed too loud. Daniel did not laugh. Daniel watched Seojin's face. Seojin set the vodka glass down on the bar. He did not set it down hard. He set it down with the same precise quietness his mother had used when she closed the library door, and Daniel, who was the careful one, noticed. "Say that again," Seojin said. Jae-woo, who was not the careful one, said it again. "Nobody tells you no, Hyung. Not really. Not for real. The waiters say yes, the drivers say yes, the girls say yes before you finish asking. Your mother pretends to say no, and then arranges what she wanted anyway. You haven't heard a real no in 20 years. I'd bet money on it." Minho stopped laughing. He had finally read the room. Seojin looked at Jae-woo for a long moment. Then he looked across the ballroom. Yuri was at the far end of the room, talking to 2 of his mother's friends, women with brittle hair and harder jewelry, and even from this distance he could see that Yuri was telling them something carefully edited about him. He could see the small smile. He could see the way the older women were leaning in. He could see exactly what tonight was supposed to be. He turned back to his friends. "You want to bet money, Hyung. You said you'd bet money. Put it on the bar." Jae-woo's grin faltered. Minho was suddenly very interested in his drink. Daniel said quietly, "Seojin, don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make a thing of it. He's drunk. We're all drunk." "I'm not drunk." Daniel did not answer. Seojin was drunk. Not very, not falling, but enough that the precision in his hands was about half a beat behind where his hands meant to go, and Daniel had known him long enough to see it. "Hyung," Jae-woo tried. "I was joking." "You were not joking. You were being honest. It is the only honest thing anybody has said to me all night. So I am going to be honest back." Seojin picked up the vodka glass again. He did not drink. He held it up like a small clear flag. "You are right. Nobody in this room is going to tell me no. Not tonight, not next week, not next year. Hyung, please." "So." Seojin's voice rose, not into a shout, but into the projected, carrying tone of a man used to making a room listen without effort. The string quartet was between pieces. The room was, accidentally, quiet. Several heads were already turning. So I will make this simple. Hey Rim, on the far side of the room, set down her champagne flute without drinking from it. She had heard that tone in her husband. She knew what it preceded. She started to walk. I will marry, Seojin said, loud enough now that the heads that had been turning stopped pretending not to listen. The first woman in this room who tells me no. A real no. Not a flirt, not a game. A no with her spine in it. The ballroom went still. It went still the way a room goes still when someone drops a glass on stone. There was the same sharp pause, the same small intake of breath from 20 different mouths at once. The string quartet, who had been about to start the next piece, did not start it. The first violinist looked at the second violinist. The second violinist looked at the floor. Yuri Han turned her head slowly. Hayrim was halfway across the room and did not run, because Madame Kang did not run, but her steps lengthened by 2 full inches per stride, and a server who saw her coming stepped aside without being asked. Seojin smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was not unpleasant either. It was the smile of a man who had just put a match to a long fuse and was waiting to find out what it was attached to. Anyone, he said. Any woman in this room. Tell me no. Right now. Tell me no to anything. Tell me no to this drink, no to this dance, no to this house. Look me in the eye and tell me no and mean it. The first one of you who does it, I marry. Minho laughed nervously. Hyung, come on. Sojin did not look at Minho. He was scanning the room. 3 things happened in the next 10 seconds. The first thing was that one of his mother's friends, a woman in emerald green named Mrs. Choi, said, "Oh, Sojin, no, you wicked boy. You cannot say such things at a party," and laughed behind her hand. Her 3 no's were musical. They were the no's of a grandmother scolding a clever grandson. They were not no's with spine. Seojin smiled at her politely and shook his head once, and her face fell, because she had wanted, briefly, in spite of being 64 years old and married, to have been the one. The second thing was that a young woman near the piano, a daughter of one of the investors, called out in a high, bright voice, "No, Mr. Kang, absolutely not. I refuse." She put a hand on her hip. She tossed her hair. Her friends squealed. It was a performance of refusal so transparent that 2 men near her actually applauded. Sojin watched her perform it. He shook his head a second time. The young woman's smile cracked at one corner. The third thing was that Yuri Han, who had been watching all of this with the stillness of a woman calculating angles, walked slowly across the floor toward him. She did not hurry. She had decided something. When she reached him, she put her hand on his forearm, not possessively, just resting it there in front of the entire room, and she looked up at him with her painted lips parted just enough to be photographed, and she said, very softly, "No." The room held its breath. She said it again, slightly louder. "No, Seojin. Not like this. Not in front of all these people. Ask me properly tomorrow." It was a beautiful no. It was a no with stage lighting. It was a no engineered to look like a yes wearing a nose coat, and 3/4 of the ballroom believed it for a full 2 seconds. Seojin looked down at her hand on his forearm. He lifted it off, gently, the way you remove a leaf from a sleeve, and he set it back at her side. Yuri's face did not change. Only her eyes changed. The pupils contracted by a fraction. "That was a yes," he said, quietly enough that only she and the 4 people closest could hear. "That was a yes wearing a nose dress. Try again, Yuri see. Or step back." Yuri did not try again. She stepped back. 1 step, then another. Her face was still arranged for the room, still smiling the small practiced smile. But Hayrim, who had arrived now at her son's elbow, saw the second step and understood that the deal had not been made and might not be made and might, in fact, have just been killed in front of 300 witnesses. "Seojin," Hayrim said in Korean, low and flat. "Enough. Upstairs, now." "Not yet, mother. Now. Not yet." He had never said no to her in public before. He had said no to her in libraries, in cars, in the back of restaurants, but never in a room of 300 guests with the quartet pretending to tune. Hayrim's mouth thinned to a line. She did not argue. She did not have the option of arguing without the room watching her lose. She stepped half a pace back instead, into the position of a woman observing rather than directing, and her jade ring caught the light again and held it like a small green warning. The room waited. Seo-jin lifted his vodka glass. It was almost empty. He looked at it for a moment as if surprised to find it in his hand. Then he set it down on the bar behind him, gently, and turned back to the ballroom. Anyone else? Nobody answered. The young woman by the piano had retreated into her circle of friends. Mrs. Choi was suddenly engrossed in her bracelet. Yuri was still standing where Seo-jin had set her hand back at her side, exactly 1.5 steps away, and her chin was up. "Anyone?" he said again. Silence. The kind of silence that is not really silence but is made up of fabric rustling and ice settling in glasses and 300 people deciding, individually, that they did not want to be the woman in question. Seo-jin smiled. The smile this time was tired around the edges. "There," he said softly, to nobody in particular. "There, you see. Jae-woo, you were right. Drinks on the house. Music, please." The first violinist, grateful for instruction, lifted her bow. The quartet slid into a waltz so smoothly it was as if the last 60 seconds had been a small private dream the ballroom had collectively woken from. Conversations restarted. The bar got busy. Mrs. Choi laughed too loud at something her husband had not said. The young woman by the piano announced to her friends that she had absolutely not been serious. Yuri Han walked back to Haerim's friends with her shoulders perfectly level and accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray. The tray was Taylor's. Taylor had crossed the room during the silence. She had not crossed it on purpose. She had crossed it because the tray needed to reach the women in the corner, and because nobody had told her to stop, and she had walked through the held breath of 300 guests at a pace that did not change. She had heard every word. She had heard the first no, the second no, the third no, and the way he had peeled Yuri's hand off his arm like a leaf. She had heard Haerim's now, and her son's not yet. She had not slowed down. She handed Yuri the champagne flute. Yuri took it without looking at her. Yuri never looked at her. Taylor turned, tray balanced on her left hand, and began the long walk back across the ballroom toward the kitchen. She had to pass within 6 feet of Seo-jin to get there. He saw her before she reached him. He did not mean to. He had been turning back to the bar to ask the bartender for water, because his mother's voice was still in the back of his head about the vodka and his face, and his eyes had caught on movement at the edge of the floor. The movement was a young woman in a black dress and a white apron carrying an almost empty silver tray. Her wrist was steady. Her back was straight. Her face was set in the polite, distant arrangement of a servant in a house that did not see her. He watched her come. She did not look at him. She was not going to look at him. She had been trained, in her first 3 days at this house, by a head housekeeper who had been very clear about what maids did and did not do with their eyes at events like this one. Maids did not look at guests. Maids did not look at the family. Maids looked at the tray, at the floor, at the next door, and they kept moving. Taylor looked at the floor. She was 3 steps from passing him when he spoke. He did not speak loudly. He spoke at the exact pitch a tired man uses when he has finally remembered what he was thirsty for. "You, bring me another vodka." The room had not fully restarted yet. There was still a held-over thinness in the noise around the bar, a residual attention, the way a crowd that has just watched something half-finished keeps its ear cocked in case there is more. The quartet was playing. People were talking, but within 10 feet of Seo-jin Kang, perhaps 15 people heard him say it. Taylor stopped walking. She did not stop suddenly. She did not stop dramatically. She finished the step she was on, set her right foot down, brought her left foot up to meet it, and stood. The almost empty tray was still balanced perfectly on her left hand. The seam of her right shoe pressed against the bone of her ankle. She felt it. She did not adjust. She turned her head. The motion was small. It was not theatrical. It was the unhurried turn of a woman who had spent the entire evening being looked through and had decided, at this exact second, that she would no longer participate in that arrangement. The tray on her left hand did not so much as tilt. Her shoulders did not lift. Her chin did not jut. Only her head moved, and the long dark hair against her right shoulder shifted 1/2 inch with it, and the small pearl in her right ear caught a thin line of chandelier light and threw it briefly onto the white of her collar. A woman near the piano made a small sound. It was not a word. It was the involuntary sound a person makes when they recognize the start of something before they have language for it. The bartender, mid-pour, stopped pouring. A thin, clear stream of vodka hung above the rim of an empty glass for a full second before he remembered to right the bottle. A drop landed on the bar. Nobody noticed but him. He stepped back from the bar very slightly, as a man steps back from a stove that has begun to smoke. Daniel, who was the careful one, set his own drink down on the nearest surface, without looking where the surface was. The glass clicked against marble. He did not retrieve it. Hayrim's right hand closed around the jade ring on her own annular finger. She did not turn the ring, she only closed her hand around it, the way some women close their hand around a rosary, and waited. She looked, for the first time in 14 months of working in this house, directly at Kang So-jin's face. Not at his lapel, not at his collar, not at the base of the black and red dragon climbing out of his shirt. At his eyes. Hayrim, 3 feet behind her son, saw the maid turn her head and felt something cold and very old slide down her spine. She had seen that turn of the head before, once, when she was 23 years old, in a mirror, on the night she had decided to marry the man who would become So-jin's father against the advice of every elder in 2 families. She knew that turn of the head. She knew what came after it. The room, without meaning to, leaned in. Kang So-jin felt his mother's stillness before he saw it. He had grown up reading that woman the way other men read weather. The closed hand around the jade ring was a sentence finished without words. It said, "Do not embarrass this family further." It said, "I am still your mother, and this room is still mine." It said, "Choose." He set his empty glass on a passing tray without looking at the server. His jaw tightened once and then released, the way a man releases a fist he has decided not to throw. He did not look at his mother. He did not look at Yuri Han. He looked, instead, at the wide oak door at the far end of the ballroom, where the staff came and went with bottles and napkins and small white plates. He was waiting for her. He did not know he was waiting for her until she stepped back through the doorway with a fresh tray balanced on her left palm, 6 tall flutes of champagne arranged in a perfect circle around a single low glass of clear water. The water glass was for the senator near the fireplace, who had asked, 2 songs ago, for something that did not bubble. Taylor Harrison had remembered. Of course she had remembered. She remembered everything in this house, and nobody, until tonight, had thought to notice. Seo-jin's amigo, the one with the loud laugh and the loose tie, leaned in again and started a new sentence. Something about Yuri, something about her father's shipping routes. Seo-jin did not hear it. He was watching the slow, steady walk of the empregada, in the black dress and the white apron, as she moved between the marble columns. She did not rush. She did not smile at anyone she had not been spoken to first. The mecha levantada do lado esquerdo do cabelo dela caught the chandelier light once and threw it back, and Seo-jin felt something low in his chest do a small, dangerous thing. He stepped away from his amigos. He stepped away from Yuri Han, who was mid-sentence about a vineyard in Sonoma. He stepped, slowly, out into the open floor of the salon, where 200 guests were pretending not to watch him. Madame Kang Hayrim's hand stayed closed around the jade ring. Taylor saw him coming. She did not flinch, she did not slow. She continued her line toward the senator by the fireplace, delivered the low glass of water without a word, accepted the senator's small nod, and turned back into the room with 5 flutes still on the tray. Only then did she allow herself to lift her eyes and meet the gaze of the man walking directly toward her across the marble. He stopped 1 step closer than a guest should stop to a servant in any room in this city. "Miss," he said. His voice was not loud. It carried anyway, because the salon had quieted around them without permission. "I would like another vodka, top shelf, no ice." The senator by the fireplace turned his head. The 2 diplomats by the piano turned their heads. Yuri Han, across the floor, set down her wineglass on a side table with a small, careful click. Hayrim did not move at all. Taylor lowered the tray a 1/4 inch so that the 5 flutes did not tremble. She looked up at Kang So-jin's face. She saw the slight gloss in his eyes that came from too much, too fast. She saw the small tightness at the corner of his mouth that meant he was performing for the room and hating himself for it. She saw, beneath the dragao tattoo curling up out of his collar, the steady pulse in his throat. She said, "No, Mr. Kang." The salon did not gasp. It did something quieter and more dangerous than a gasp. It exhaled all at once, 200 people releasing breath they had not realized they were holding, and the chandeliers above seemed to dim by a single degree, as if the lights themselves had leaned forward to listen. "You've had enough already, sir," Taylor said. Her voice was low. Her voice was perfectly level. Her voice did not shake 1 millimeter. "If you'd like water, I'll bring you water. If you'd like coffee, I'll bring you coffee. But I won't bring you more vodka tonight." The man with the loose tie, 3 meters behind him, started to laugh, and then choked on it when nobody else laughed with him. The amigo on the other side of Yuri opened his mouth to say something and shut it again. Yuri Han's perfect lips parted in a small, soundless O of disbelief. Hei-rim Kang, the mother, the matriarcha, the woman whose hand was still closed around her jade ring, lifted her chin half a degree and watched her son's face the way a general watches the sky before a battle. Seo-jin laughed. It started in his chest and rose up his throat and broke over his teeth, and it was not the laugh of a humiliated man. It was the laugh of a man who has been waiting for one true thing to happen all night and has finally heard it. It was, the people in that salon would later say, the first time in 3 years anyone had heard Kang So-jin laugh as if he meant it. "You won't bring me more vodka," he repeated. He said it slowly. He said it the way a man tastes a sentence he has been hungry for. "You won't bring me more vodka." "No, sir," Taylor said. "Why not?" "Because you don't need it." She let the tray settle a fraction more. The flutes did not move. "And because I'm not paid to help a good man become a worse one in front of his mother." The salon exhaled again. Madame Kang's hand opened on the jade ring. Just opened. Just released. Her shoulders did not move. Her face did not move. But the hand opened, and the people closest to her, the senator's wife, the French ambassador, the cousin from Seoul, all of them saw it and understood that something had shifted in the architecture of this family that they would talk about, in low voices, for the rest of the year. Seo-jin took one slow step closer. Taylor did not step back. He was tall enough that he had to tip his chin down to look at her, and the chandelier light caught the dragao on his neck and turned the red of the scales into something that pulsed. "What's your name?" "Taylor Harrison, Mr. Kang." "How long have you worked in this house, Miss Harrison?" 14 months, sir." "And in 14 months, has anyone in this family ever asked you your name before tonight?" She did not answer. She did not have to. The silence in the salon answered for her. Seo-jin nodded once, slowly, like a man writing something in a ledger he did not intend to forget. Then he turned, not away from her but with her, so that he was standing beside her now instead of in front of her, and he addressed the entire room. His voice, when it came, was perfectly clear. Not slurred, not loud. Clear, the way a bell is clear. "Earlier tonight," he said, "I told my friends I would marry the first woman who said no to me. They thought I was joking. Half the women in this room thought I was performing." He paused. He let it land. "I was not performing." Yuri Han stepped forward one small, sharp step. Hei-rim Kang lifted one finger half an inch from the rim of her wineglass, and Yuri Han stopped. "Miss Harrison," Seo-jin said, turning back to Taylor, "you just said no to me in front of 200 people, in front of my mother, in front of every man in this room who's been telling me for 10 years that I cannot be told no." He paused. The dragao on his throat moved with his swallow. "Was that the truth? Or was that you performing too?" Taylor lifted her face and met his eyes fully for the first time. "That was the truth, sir." "Why?" "Because watching you drink yourself into a clown for a girl you don't love isn't entertainment to me." She said it quietly. She said it for him and the 4 people closest to them, and nobody else. But the room caught it anyway, the way a room catches a knife that has been dropped on marble. "And because I've been in this house long enough to know you're better than this night." The chandelier light shivered. Yuri Han made a small, ugly sound at the back of her throat. The senator's wife, who had not blinked in 90 seconds, finally blinked. Seo-jin took half a breath, then another. "You've been in this house long enough," he repeated. "To know what?" "To know," Taylor said, "that you check the staff schedule before you fly out, and that you wrote off Mrs. Park's hospital bills last month, even though she signed an NDA promising not to tell anyone you did. To know you fired Mr. Choi from the kitchen for screaming at Anastasia, and then hired her a tutor so she could finish her English nights. She paused. The flutes on the tray still did not move. To know that the man standing in front of me right now, sober, is not the man who's been ordering vodka all night. So no, Mr. Kang, I won't bring you more. I'll bring you water. And in the morning, if you remember any of this, I'll still be here. The salon did not exhale this time. It held its breath. Madame Kang Hae Rim, the mother, the matriarcha, the woman who had spent 14 months in this house, never once allowing herself to look directly at this young black American empregada, looked at her now. Looked at her fully. Looked at her with the same steady examination she had given her son 2 minutes earlier. And the jade ring on her annular finger turned. Just once. Half a rotation. The first turn of the night. Seo-jin closed his eyes. He closed his eyes the way a man closes his eyes when something he did not know he was missing has just walked into the room and sat down in the empty chair across from him. When he opened them again, he was sober. Not chemically, not yet. But in the only way that mattered in that moment, he was sober. He turned away from Taylor. He turned toward the room. He raised his empty hand, the one without the glass, and his voice when it came was not the voice of the drunk young heir his amigos had been laughing with. It was the voice of Kang So-jin, eldest son of the Kang family, future of the empire. It was the voice his mother had been waiting 14 months to hear again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you all for coming tonight. The party is not over. Please, continue. Eat, drink, dance. My mother has spent 3 months on this menu, and I will not let any of you leave it cold." A small, polite ripple of laughter from the diplomats by the piano. He gave them a half nod. "But I will be stepping out of the salon for a few minutes. There is a conversation I owe to one of the people who works in this house, and I have been delaying it too long." He turned back to Taylor. "Miss Harrison, when your shift ends tonight, will you sit with me, in the small library, for 10 minutes? Just 10. With the door open, with my mother's housekeeper in the corner, with a glass of water, not vodka, in my hand." Taylor did not answer immediately. She looked at the tray. She looked at the 5 flutes. She looked at the senator by the fireplace, who had heard everything and was watching her now with the same careful expression he wore in committee hearings. She looked, finally, at Madame Kang Hae Rim, because she was a smart woman and she understood that this house had 2 thrones, and one of them was wearing a hanbok of seda azul marino with bordado prateado, and no conversation in the small library would happen without that throne's permission. Madame Kang did not nod. Madame Kang did not smile. Madame Kang simply lowered her chin 1/2 degree, which in the grammar of that woman's face was the closest thing to a yes that anyone in the room had ever seen her give in public. Taylor turned back to Seo-jin. 10 minutes, Mr. Kang. With the door open, with Mrs. Lee in the corner, and only after I finish my shift. There are still 90 glasses on this tray's worth of guests in this salon who paid for service tonight, and I won't leave them thirsty because you remembered my name." Seo-jin smiled. The drageo on his throat moved with the smile, and for the first time all night his eyes crinkled at the corners the way they used to when he was 20 and had not yet learned to be the heir. "Of course, Miss Harrison. Finish your shift. I'll wait." He stepped back from her. He gave a small, almost imperceptible bow, the kind a man gives in soul to someone he considers his equal, and the people closest to them in the salon saw it and understood and went pale in their faces because Kang So-jin had just bowed, in his own mother's ballroom, to the empregada negra in the black dress and the white apron. He turned and walked back to his amigos. The one with the loose tie opened his mouth. Seo-jin held up one finger without looking at him, and the amigo closed his mouth again. Yuri Han stood frozen by the side table with her wine glass abandoned beside her, her perfect curacao-shaped rosto for the first time all night arranged in an expression that did not match any expression she had practiced in any mirror. Taylor lifted her tray. She turned, slowly, on the polished marble and resumed her circuit of the salon. 2 diplomats, the French ambassador, a cousin from Seoul who took a flute and then a second flute, and did not, when she came back around 3 minutes later, look up at her face. The senator by the fireplace took his fresh glass of water from her hand and said, in a voice low enough that only she heard it, "Good evening, Miss Harrison." It was the first time in 14 months that anyone in that salon had addressed her by name twice in one evening. The party did not end. The party went on for 2 more hours, as parties of that scale always do, with the violins shifting from the slow waltzes to the faster ones, and the champagne flowing, and the diplomats laughing too loud near the piano. But everyone in that room knew that the real evening had already happened, that the only thing worth remembering had occurred in the 90 seconds between a tray of champagne and a glass of water, and that they would all be telling the story for the rest of the year and getting the details wrong. Yuri Han left at 11:45. She did not say goodbye to Seo Jin. She kissed Haerim's cheek with the small, brittle precision of a woman who knew she had lost a battle and was already calculating the next one. Haerim accepted the kiss without warmth and without coldness, and she watched the long red Vigno dress disappear through the front door without a comment. Seo Jin did not get drunk again. He drank water for the rest of the night. He drank water in front of his amigos, who stopped teasing him after the first half hour because they understood, dimly, that something had shifted, and that the rules of the evening had been rewritten in a language none of them spoke yet. He drank water in front of his mother, who watched him from across the salon with the careful attention of a woman who has just seen her son become recognizable to her for the first time in years. At 12:47, the last guests left. The senator by the fireplace shook Sojin's hand and said something quiet about a vote next week. The French ambassador kissed Haerim's cheek. The cousin from Seoul lingered at the door with a question on her face, and then thought better of asking it and left. The doors closed. The salon, which had held 200 people an hour earlier, now held only 7. 3 members of the staff stacking glasses. Mrs. Lee, the housekeeper, supervising the breakdown of the canapé tables. Madame Kang Haerim, standing at the center of the marble floor with her hand once again closed around the jade ring on her annular finger. Kang Seo-jin, standing 6 meters away from his mother, with his hands in the pockets of his terno pretto and his eyes on the closed doors of the small library at the far end of the salon. And Taylor Harrison, who had just placed the last empty tray on the cart and was untying the strings of her Avental Branco at the small of her back, because her shift was now formally over. She did not retie the Avental. She let the strings hang. She walked across the marble floor, past the stacked glasses, past Mrs. Lee, past the staff members who watched her with eyes wide enough to take up half their faces, and she walked directly toward Madame Kang Haerim, because she was a smart woman, and she understood that the small library was Haerim's library, in Haerim's house, and no conversation in that room would happen without first paying respect to the woman who had built it. She stopped 2 meters from Madame Kang. She lowered her head, not deeply, not servilely, but with the small measured bow of a woman acknowledging another woman's authority in her own home. "Madame Kang," she said, "your son asked me for 10 minutes in your library. I will not take it without your permission." Haerim did not answer immediately. She studied Taylor's face for a long moment, longer than was comfortable, the way a buyer studies a horse before deciding whether to bid. She studied the steady eyes. She studied the corpo de ampulleta beneath the simple black uniform. She studied the loose strings of the apron, which Taylor had not tied back into a servant's knot. She studied the mecha levantada do lado esquerdo do cabelo, and something flickered behind her eyes that might have been memory or might have been calculation. "Mrs. Lee," Haerim said without turning her head, "will sit in the corner of the library. The door will remain open. There will be a tray of tea, not vodka." "Yes, madame." "My son," Haerim said, and now she did turn her head. Only an inch, only enough to address Seo-jin across the marble, "will keep his hands in his pockets." "Yes, mother." "And you, Miss Harrison." Haerim turned the jade ring half a rotation again. "The second turn of the night, you will speak honestly. You will not perform. If my son says anything tonight that he will not still mean in the morning, you will tell me so tomorrow at breakfast, and I will manage him myself." Taylor lifted her head and met Haerim's eyes fully. "Yes, Madame Kang." "Then go." Taylor did not bow again. She turned, slowly, on the marble and crossed the empty salon toward the open doors of the small library. Mrs. Lee, the housekeeper, fell in behind her at a respectful distance. Seo-jin, hands in pockets exactly as instructed, followed. The doors of the small library did not close. The doors of the small library, in fact, remained open for the next 47 minutes, and any member of the staff who happened to walk past during that time could see, framed in the warm lamplight inside, the elegant figure of Mrs. Lee in her dark uniform, sitting in the corner armchair with a book she did not open, and across the small mahogany table from each other, a young black woman in a black dress with the strings of her apron hanging loose, and a young Korean man in a black turno with the dragao tattoo curling up out of his open collar, neither of them touching the cups of tea between them, neither of them in any hurry to fill the silence with anything that was not the slow, careful, sober building of the first real conversation either of them had ever had with another human being who could see them all the way through. Madame Kang Hae Rim, alone now in the center of the empty salon, lifted her hand to her own mouth and pressed 2 fingers against her lips. The chandeliers above her dimmed automatically to their late-night setting. The marble beneath her feet was scattered with the small confetti of an evening that had ended. She stood there for a long time, looking at the open doors of her library across the floor, and the jade ring on her annular finger turned, of its own accord, a third full rotation. She had not turned the jade ring 3 times in one night in 26 years. The last time, she had been deciding whether to marry the father of the man currently sitting in her library with the empregada. She did not, this time, look surprised by the coincidence. She turned, slowly, on the marble, and walked toward the grand staircase, because she was a woman who understood that some conversations belonged only to the people inside them, and that a good mother knew when to leave the room and let the future of her family be built by hands that were not hers. Behind her, in the small library, the 2 figures at the small mahogany table leaned, almost imperceptibly, toward each other across the cups of cooling tea. Neither of them yet knew the names of the storms that were coming for them. Neither of them yet knew that Yuri Han was already, in the back seat of her car 20 blocks south, dialing a number on her phone that should not, by any decent measure, have been in her contacts at all. Neither of them yet knew that, by the time the sun came up over Manhattan, 3 new players would have entered this story, and the small library with its open door and its cooling tea and its quiet old housekeeper in the corner would already feel, in retrospect, like the last truly private moment they would ever be allowed to share. But for now, for these 47 minutes, the library was a room with no clock in it, and inside that room, Kang So-jin, sober for the first time in months, leaned forward across the table and said, very quietly, "Tell me one true thing about yourself, Miss Harrison. Anything. The first thing that comes to you." And Taylor Harrison, who had been waiting 14 months for someone in this house to ask her exactly that question, took a slow breath, lifted her steady brown eyes to his, and began to answer. She told him, first, about her grandmother in South Carolina, the one who had raised her in a small wooden house with a tin roof and a vegetable garden that fed 3 families on the same block. She told him about the day she was 11 years old and her grandmother had handed her a starched white apron and said, "Child, the world will try to make you small in this thing. Wear it anyway. Wear it like it is the robe of a queen, because the only person who decides what a uniform means is the woman inside it." She told him she had carried that sentence with her into every kitchen and every dining room and every salon she had ever worked in, and that she had not, until tonight, met a single man in any of those rooms who looked at the apron and saw the robe. So-jin did not interrupt. He did not lean back. He did not reach across the table. His hands stayed exactly where his mother had told him to keep them, deep in the pockets of his terno preto, and the dragao on his throat moved only with the slow, careful rhythm of his breathing. Mrs. Lee, in the corner, turned a page of the book she was not reading. The clock that was not in the room did not tick. The tea continued to cool, and outside, in the empty marble salon, the chandeliers dimmed one final degree, as if the house itself had decided to give these 2 people the kindness of a slightly darker room in which to begin. The slightly darker room did not last. A footman, oblivious to the small mercy the chandeliers had granted, reached up at the wall panel and nudged the dimmer back to where the gala had been. Light flooded the marble salon again. The floor became a polished mirror under the heels of the few stragglers who had not yet been hustled out, and in the library, where Taylor Harrison stood with her honey-toned hand still flat against the front of Kang So-jin's white dress shirt, the new brightness leaked under the door and laid a thin gold line at their feet. So-jin looked down at her hand. He did not move. The dragon on the right side of his neck rose with his breath, scales lifting slightly, head paused just under the lobe of his ear, as if it were also listening. Taylor felt the steadiness of the heart under her palm, slower now than her own. "Not like this," she said again, quieter, in case the first time had not been heard right. "Sober. Tomorrow. No audience. No vodka talking for you." He took half a step back. The black silk of his jacket whispered against the leather of the nearest armchair. His mother's house had taught him a particular kind of obedience to the word no, even when his own house had stopped teaching it to him years ago, and his body remembered the lesson before his pride could argue with it. "All right," he said. That was all. 2 syllables in English, low, almost private. No counteroffer. No tilt of his chin toward her mouth, no hand catching her wrist on the way down. He simply stepped back, and the small bright space her hand had been pressing into went cold where the warmth of him had been a moment before. Taylor lowered her arm slowly. The starched white cuff at her wrist caught the chandelier light. She was aware, in the way servants are always aware, of the way her uniform creased at the elbow, of the small wrinkle in the apron, of one strand of her dark hair that had escaped the wind of the corridor and fallen across her cheek. She did not push it back. To push it back would have been to fuss. She had not come into this room to fuss. "Thank you," she said, steady, not soft, for hearing the word the first time. "It is not a difficult word," Seo-jin said. His Korean accent in English softened the consonants in a way that made the sentence sound older than he was. "It is only difficult when one is not used to it. I am, as you saw tonight, not used to it." "You will get used to it," Taylor said. "If you mean what you said out there." His eyes moved across her face, not down her body. Across her face, eyebrow, cheekbone, the corner of her mouth where the wide, bright smile would have been, if there had been any reason at all in this room to smile. "I meant what I said," he answered. "I am only afraid now that I will not be able to say it as well sober as I said it drunk." "Then practice," Taylor said. He laughed, once. A short, surprised laugh. The dragon shifted on his neck with the laugh and then settled again. "That is the most expensive piece of advice I have received in this house in a very long time," he said. "Practice. Yes, I will practice." Out in the salon, Mrs. Lee's voice rose briefly, low and severe, directing the last of the waitstaff. A tray clinked. Somewhere far off, on the second floor, a door closed with the soft, definite click of money. The party was over. The house was beginning its second life of the night, the life it had after the guests left, when the marble cooled and the staff began to remember they had feet. Taylor took a breath. There was something else she had to say. She had walked into this room knowing she would have to say it, and she had spent the long minute against his chest, trying to find the right shape for the words. She found, now, that there was no right shape. There was only the truth, said plainly, the way her mother had taught her to say truths back home in a small kitchen, in a small house far from any chandelier. "Mr. Kang," she said. "Seo-jin," he corrected. Gentle, not insistent. "Mr. Kang," she said again, because the uniform was still on her body and the apron was still tied at her waist, and she had not yet been given any other name to use. "Before I leave this room, I need you to know something. So you can sleep tonight knowing it, and so tomorrow, when you come to find me sober, you can come to find me with the whole picture." He waited. He did not interrupt. That, too, she noted. A man used to being told no would have filled the pause. A man practicing would not. "I did not say no to you tonight because I do not like you," Taylor said. The dragon went very still. "I said no to you tonight because I do like you," she said, "and I have liked you for a longer time than is decent for a woman in this uniform to admit out loud in a library where her employer can hear her." Seo-jin's hand, the one with the silver Kang family signet on the right pinky, closed slowly on the edge of the nearest bookshelf. The leather spines pressed against the side of his knuckle. He did not look at the books. He looked at her. "How long?" he said. "Long enough," Taylor said. "Long enough to know which side of the table you sit on when you eat alone in the breakfast room. Long enough to know which suits Mrs. Lee lays out for you when you have a meeting you do not want, and which she lays out for you when you have a meeting you do. Long enough to have been in the side hallway the morning Mrs. Park dropped the tray of porcelain and your mother raised her voice at her, and to have heard you, 2 doors down, raise your voice back at your mother for the first time in this house in I do not know how many years, and to have heard you say, very quietly, when your mother had gone, that you would replace every piece of that porcelain from your own account so that it never came out of Mrs. Park's wages. The library was so quiet that she could hear the small dry sound of the leather under his thumb. "I was not supposed to hear that," she said. "I was carrying laundry. I stopped in the hallway because I could not move with what I was hearing." And when Mrs. Park came back into the laundry room 20 minutes later, she was crying, and she would not say why, and I did not tell her. Because it was not my mouth's place to give her that gift. It was yours. "Taylor," Seojin said. It was the first time she realized that he had said her name in this room. He had said many other things, pretty things, sharp things, drunk things, but he had not, until this moment, used the 4 letters of her actual name. She kept going. She had decided, against the door earlier in the corridor, that she would not stop until the whole picture was on the table between them. "And 6 weeks ago," she said, "Carmen in the kitchen, who has a little boy who has been sick since the spring, found an envelope in her locker. There was no name on the envelope. There was cash in the envelope. Enough cash that she sat down on the bench in the staff room and cried for 10 minutes and could not work the rest of her shift. She told us it must have been a saint. She is a religious woman. She believed a saint had found her locker." A small muscle moved in Seojin's jaw. "It was not a saint, Mr. Kang," Taylor said. "I was the one who emptied your wastepaper basket that morning. There was a torn corner of a bank slip in it, with Carmen's son's name written on it in your handwriting. In Korean and in English, both. As if you had been practicing how to spell the boy's name correctly so that the bank would not get it wrong." She watched his face. She had thought, when she rehearsed this in her head over the last weeks, that he would deny it. Rich men, in her experience, denied kindness the way poor men denied debts, quickly, with both hands. But Seojin did not deny it. He simply looked at her, and the line of his mouth softened in a way she had not seen at any point during the party, not even when he had been laughing. "I did not know," he said, "that there was a torn corner of anything in that basket." "There usually is not," Taylor said. "Mrs. Lee is very good at her job. But that morning she was downstairs reorganizing the silver, and I was the one who came up. And so I am the one who knows." "And you did not tell Carmen," he said. "I did not tell anyone," Taylor said. "Until now. Until you." He let go of the bookshelf. He took one step toward her, and then he did not take a second, because she had told him once already what tonight was not for, and he was practicing. "So you see," Taylor said, "when you walked into the salon tonight and said you would marry the first woman who told you no, I did not hear the words you said. I heard the other words, the ones that came before them, the ones you do not say out loud. And when you turned to me with the bottle of vodka in your hand and you asked me to fill your glass again, I knew that if I said yes to you tonight, in front of those people, in that uniform, with that smell of alcohol in the air between us, I would never know, and you would never know, whether what we had started was the man you are at the breakfast table at 6 in the morning, or the man you were at the chandelier at 2. Seojin closed his eyes for one slow second. When he opened them, they were wet at the very inner corner. He did not let the wetness move. He had been raised, she could tell from the way he held it, in a house where one did not let such things move. "You are," he said, "the most frightening woman I have ever met." "I am not frightening, Mr. Kang," Taylor said. "I am only awake." "Yes," he said, "that is what I meant." The clock that was not in the room continued not to tick. The tea in the salon continued to cool. Somewhere on the second floor, Madame Kang Hae-rim had walked very slowly back toward her private wing, with her hands clasped behind her back the way she always clasped them when she was thinking, and Mrs. Lee had finally allowed herself to sit down on the small stool by the pantry door and to take off, for one breath only, the impeccable shoes that had been on her feet since 6 that morning. Taylor took a step toward the door, not away from him, toward the door. She had said what she had come to say. To stay longer was to begin a new conversation, and the new conversation was the one for tomorrow, sober, without a uniform between them, and without champagne in the air. "What time?" Seojin said. She paused with her hand near the doorknob. She did not turn fully back. "What time what, Mr. Kang? What time tomorrow?" She thought about it. She did not think about it the way a woman thinks when she is being chased. She thought about it the way a woman thinks when she is naming the hour at which her own life will change. My shift starts at 6, she said. I have a break at 11. 20 minutes. In the staff garden, behind the kitchen, by the small lemon tree your mother had brought from Korea. 11, he said. 11, she repeated. Sober. No audience. No vodka. No uniform decisions made for you by your friends and your bottle. Just you, walking out the kitchen door and finding me by the lemon tree. If you come, I will hear you out. If you do not come, I will know which man you were tonight, and I will go on with my work, and we will not speak of this again, and the house will continue as it was. I will come, he said. Do not promise tonight, she said. Tonight is still part of the vodka. Promise me at 11. He bowed his head. Not deeply. Just enough. The kind of small bow she had seen Madame Kang give her own husband's portrait in the front hall on the anniversary of his death. A bow that was not for show. At 11, then, he said. I will promise you at 11. Taylor put her hand on the doorknob. The brass was cold against her palm, colder than the front of his shirt had been. She turned it slowly, so that the latch would not click against the polished wood, and bring Mrs. Lee, who was almost certainly still in the salon, running in to see what had been disturbed. Mr. Kang, she said, without turning around. One more thing. Yes, your mother is not the enemy of this conversation. There was a beat. She heard him breathe. I know, he said, finally. I have always known that. I only sometimes forget. Do not forget tomorrow, Taylor said. Whatever else you remember, do not forget that. She opened the door. The salon light spilled in, and her own shadow stretched long and thin into the library behind her, all the way to the toes of his polished black shoes. She stepped out of the library and pulled the door closed behind her with the same careful slowness, and she stood for one breath with her back to it, and her hand on the apron at her waist, and her eyes on the empty marble floor. Mrs. Lee was, of course, in the salon. Mrs. Lee was always where she needed to be. She did not look up from the small silver tray she was polishing with a soft cloth on the side table by the window. She did not say Taylor's name. She did not say anything at all. But as Taylor walked past on her way back to the kitchen corridor, Mrs. Lee said, without lifting her eyes from the silver, in the small, dry voice she used when she had decided to be on someone's side, Miss Harrison, the lemon tree in the kitchen garden is on the east side. The sun comes over the wall at 10:45. If you stand on the west side of the tree at 11, no one from the upstairs windows will see you. The hedge is high there. I had it planted high on purpose, a long time ago, for reasons of my own. Taylor stopped. Her hands, at her sides, went very still. Thank you, Mrs. Lee, she said. Do not thank me yet, Miss Harrison, Mrs. Lee said. She still did not look up. Thank me in 3 months, if you are still in this house and not weeping in a taxi back to wherever you came from. Thank me in a year if you are still standing where you choose to stand and not where someone has placed you. Thank me in 5 years if the boy in the library tonight has become the man you are about to discover at 11 tomorrow in the kitchen garden. Until then, save your thanks. I have enough of them already, and most of them are from people who should not have given them so soon. Taylor inclined her head, a small bow, like Seojin's, the kind of bow that was not for show, and walked on past the silver tray and out of the salon and into the long service corridor that led to the staff stairs. In the staff stairs, in the half-dark between 2 service lamps, she stopped. She put her back against the wall. She put both hands flat on her stomach, over the white of the apron. She breathed once, in, and once out, and once again in, and once again out. Her shoulders dropped 1/4 of an inch. The strand of dark hair that had fallen across her cheek finally went back behind her ear, not because she pushed it, but because she finally turned her head to look up the stairs, and the movement caught it. She did not cry. She had decided, walking back from the library, that she would not cry. Crying tonight would have made the thing she had just done feel like a thing that had happened to her, and she had not had a thing happen to her tonight. She had done a thing. The verb mattered. The verb had always mattered, since she was 8 years old and her mother had told her, in a kitchen in another country in another life, that the women in their family did not get to be the object of sentences if they could help it. They were the subject. They were always the subject, even when the sentence was a small one. especially when the sentence was a small one. She climbed the staff stairs to her room on the third floor. She took off the mea preta and folded it. She took off the avental and hung it on the back of her chair. She did not take off the dress yet. She would, in a moment. But she sat first on the edge of the narrow bed, in the lamplight, and she looked at her own hands. Her hands were not shaking. That, more than anything else, told her she had done the right thing in the library. Her hands had not shaken when she pressed them against the front of his shirt, and they were not shaking now. Hands, in her experience, knew things before the head did. In the library, Seojin had not moved for a long time after the door closed. He had stood with one hand on the bookshelf and the other open at his side, and he had looked at the place where Taylor had been standing, as if the air there were still slightly differently colored from the rest of the air in the room. Then, slowly, he had crossed to the small side table where his mother kept the brandy decanter. The brandy decanter she kept stocked for guests, never for him, and he had looked at it for a long moment. He had not poured. He had walked instead to the window. He had looked out, past his own reflection, at the slice of Manhattan visible between the heavy curtains, at the small distant lights of the buildings on the other side of the park, at the soft yellow glow of a single taxi crossing Fifth Avenue at this late hour. He had looked at his own reflection in the dark glass, at the dragon climbing the right side of his neck, at the open collar where the two top buttons had been undone since the moment, hours ago, when his mother had told him he would be married before the year ended. "At 11, he had said, softly, to his own reflection. At 11, sober, by the lemon tree. On the west side, the side without the upstairs windows. At 11. He had said it 3 times, quietly, like a man practicing. Then he had crossed the library, turned off the lamp at the small writing desk, and walked out into the salon. Mrs. Lee was still polishing the silver tray. She did not look up at him either, as she had not looked up at Taylor. "Mrs. Lee," Seojin said, "Mr. Kang, tomorrow morning please do not assign Miss Harrison to the breakfast service." "I had already not assigned her, Mr. Kang." He paused. He looked at the back of Mrs. Lee's head, at the impeccable line of her gray-streaked bun, at the small, soft cloth moving in slow circles over the silver. "How long," he said, "have you known?" "Long enough, Mr. Kang," Mrs. Lee said, "to have planted a hedge." He stood there one more moment in the quiet of the cooling salon. Then he bowed, the small bow, the one not for show, to the back of her head, which she could not see, and which she did not need to see to know had been given. "Good night, Mrs. Lee," he said. "Good night, Mr. Kang," Mrs. Lee said. "Sleep if you can. Tomorrow at 11 you will need to be the man you said you were, and not the man you were tonight." He walked up the main staircase. The chandeliers, one by one, behind him, dimmed the final degree the footman had earlier undone, as if the house had finally won its small argument with the help. In the kitchen garden, in the dark, the lemon tree his mother had brought from Korea stood very still, and the high hedge Mrs. Lee had planted a long time ago for reasons of her own stood beside it, and the east wall waited patiently to receive, at 10:45 the next morning, the first slant of New York sun. On the second floor, in her private wing, Madame Kang Hae-rim had not gone to bed. She sat at the small lacquered writing table near her window, in the dark blue hanbok she had worn all evening, with her hands folded on the surface of the wood and her eyes on nothing in particular. The pearls at her neck caught the lamp once when she finally lifted her chin. She rang the small bell at her elbow, twice, in the pattern that meant Mrs. Lee and no one else. Mrs. Lee came in within the minute. She did not knock. Between these two women, in this house, knocking had been retired a long time ago. "Madam." "Mrs. Lee, the girl in the library tonight." "Yes, madame." "You have known about her for some time." "I have, madame." "And you did not tell me." "You did not ask, madame. And until tonight, there was nothing to tell that would not have been gossip. I do not bring gossip to this table." "I have never brought gossip to this table." Madame Kang's mouth moved at one corner. Not a smile exactly, but the place where a smile would have begun in a younger woman with less to lose. "My son said her name 3 times in his sleep last winter," she said. The nurse who sat with him during the influenza wrote it down on the chart, because she did not know it was a name and not a Korean word she had misheard. "The chart was brought to me. I have had the chart in my drawer since February." "I know, madame." Of course you know. Yes, madame. Madame Kang looked at her hands. The jade ring on her right annular caught the lamp. At 11 tomorrow, Mrs. Lee, in the kitchen garden, I will be at the upstairs window of the East Library. I will not be visible. The curtain will be closed, but I will be at the window. Do you understand what I am telling you? Perfectly, madame. If the boy is what I have begun to suspect he might be, I will close the curtain fully and walk away. If he is not, I will know, and I will act accordingly. Do you understand also what I am telling you? Perfectly, madame, Mrs. Lee said again. Good night, Mrs. Lee. Good night, madame. Mrs. Lee did not bow on her way out. Between these two women, bowing had been retired even longer than knocking. Upstairs, in her narrow room on the third floor, Taylor finally took off the black dress, folded it as neatly as she had folded the Maya's, and laid it across the chair. She turned out the lamp. She lay down in the dark on top of the thin blanket. She did not sleep immediately. She did not need to. She lay there with her hands folded over her stomach, and she listened to the old plumbing of the Kang mansion settling for the night, pipe by pipe, beam by beam, and she counted the hours, quietly, in English and in the Spanish her mother had taught her, until 11. At 11 the next morning, the Kang mansion no longer looked like a house that had hosted a gala. The crystal was packed away. The marble had been waxed. The white roses had been carried out in black bins before sunrise. The house smelled of lemon polish and coffee and the faint metallic ghost of champagne that never quite left old wood. Taylor stood in the staff hallway in her uniform. The black dress was freshly pressed, the white apron tied at her waist in a crisp bow. Her hair was pinned at the nape. The small pearl earrings caught a sliver of daylight through the high service window. She had not slept. She had lain in the narrow staff bed until 4, then risen and washed her face in cold water and pressed her uniform a second time. She had eaten half a piece of toast at the staff counter and had not been able to swallow more. Mrs. Choi came down the corridor at 10 past 11 with a clipboard in her hand and an expression Taylor had never seen there before. It was not anger. It was not pity. It was something more careful than either. Harrison, Mrs. Choi said, you are off the floor today. Taylor's hands tightened on the front of her apron. Ma'am? Mr. Kang has requested it. Mrs. Choi did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. You are not to serve. You are not to clean. You are not to enter the main reception rooms until further notice. Am I being dismissed? It was not phrased as a question. She had decided, in the long, cold hours of the night, that if this was how it ended, she would not let her voice climb. No, Mrs. Choi said. You are not being dismissed. You are being taken off the rota. For what? Mrs. Choi looked at her for a long second. The older woman's mouth moved once as if she were going to say one thing and then chose to say another. For today, Harrison, your only assignment is to do what Madame Kang asks of you. Madame Kang would like to see you in the upstairs sitting room at 11:30. Mrs. Park will accompany you. Taylor felt the floor shift 1/4 of an inch under her feet. Madame Kang, she repeated. Yes, not Mr. Kang. Madame Kang first, Mrs. Choi said. Mr. Kang has gone to the gym at the club. He will be back this afternoon. Taylor nodded once. She did not trust her face to do anything more than that. Mrs. Park, the senior housekeeper, came around the corner then, with a soft tape measure looped over one wrist and a garment bag folded over the other arm. Mrs. Park was a Korean woman in her early 60s, narrow at the shoulders, gray at the temples, and she had worked for the Kang family for 31 years. She wore a navy cardigan over a white blouse and a long charcoal skirt, and she had the gentlest hands in the house. Taylor had once seen her bandage a kitchen boy's burned wrist without ever raising her eyes from the work. Miss Harrison, Mrs. Park said. The word miss sat oddly in the corridor. Come with me, please. Taylor went. They walked up the back stairs and through the green-papered hall to a small sitting room Taylor had only ever cleaned. A long pier mirror, 2 slipper chairs, a window over the white pebble courtyard. On one chair, a dress. On the other, shoes. Taylor stopped in the doorway. Mrs. Park. Yes, miss. Please don't call me miss. Mrs. Park set the garment bag down on the bench at the foot of the long mirror. She turned. Her face was kind and entirely without surprise. Madame Kang has asked me to dress you, she said. Simply. Elegantly. She was very particular about both words. I don't understand. I know you don't, child. The older word slipped out before Mrs. Park could catch it, and she did not apologize for it. Madam Kang will explain what she chooses to explain. My job is to make sure that when you walk down the main staircase at 1 o'clock, no one in this house can pretend they don't see you. Taylor sat down on the slipper chair because her knees decided, without asking her, that they would prefer to be bent. Mrs. Park? Yes. Am I in trouble? Mrs. Park's hands, which had been undoing the long zipper of the garment bag, stopped. She looked at Taylor in the mirror first, and then she turned and looked at her directly. No, child, she said. You are not in trouble. You are in something else. Something I have not seen happen in this house in 31 years. She did not say what. She lifted the dress out of the bag instead. It was a column of pale ivory silk crepe, long-sleeved, high-necked, plain at the collar and cuffs, no embroidery, no jewels, no slit. Mrs. Park held it up against the window light, and Taylor saw the cut of it, the bias of the fabric laid so the dress would skim a body, not cling to it, the seams finished by hand. It was the kind of dress that cost a small car and pretended it had cost nothing. Madame Kang chose this herself, Mrs. Park said, from her own closet, from when she was younger. She has not worn it in 20 years. From her closet? Yes. Taylor stared at the dress. Why? Because she said, Mrs. Park answered, carefully, that you were not to be put in anything red, that you were not to be put in anything new, that you were not to look like the women who were here last night. The breath went out of Taylor's chest in a small, uneven push. She did not cry. She had decided long ago, when she was 12 and her mother was working 3 jobs, and Taylor was making her own school lunches in the dark, that crying in front of other women's kindness was a luxury she could not afford. But she held very still, and she let Mrs. Park unpin her hair. Mrs. Park worked without speaking. She took the uniform off Taylor's shoulders with the same careful hands she used on the silver. She steamed the ivory silk over the back of the chair and slipped it over Taylor's head from above, the way her own mother had taught her 60 years ago in Busan, so the fabric never dragged. The dress settled. Taylor looked in the mirror. The girl in the mirror was still her. The cheekbones were still hers. The full mouth was still hers. The wide, dark eyes were still hers. But the ivory pulled the honey of her skin forward in a way the black uniform never had, and the simple line of the dress turned the curves she usually packed away under starched cotton into something quiet and certain, something the eye had to acknowledge before it could move on. Madame Kang said no necklace, Mrs. Park said. Your own earrings. She said your own earrings. Taylor touched the small pearls at her ears with the tip of one finger. They were my grandmother's, she said. I know, child. How do you know? You told Mrs. Choi once. Madame Kang asked me yesterday morning if you wore your own jewelry. I told her your grandmother's pearls. She said, then those. Taylor closed her eyes for 1 second. She opened them again. Shoes, Mrs. Park said. The shoes on the chair were a pair of cream leather flats with a low square heel. They were a half size too large, and Mrs. Park slipped a thin silk insole into each one without comment so that they would fit. There was a small ivory clutch on the chair as well. There was a thin gold bracelet, a single chain, old, the clasp worn smooth with use. That was hers too, Mrs. Park said, when she came to this country. Mrs. Park? Yes, child. Why is she doing this? Mrs. Park took the bracelet off the chair and fastened it around Taylor's wrist herself. Madame Kang will tell you in 20 minutes, she said. I am the housekeeper. I am not the messenger. At 11:30, Mrs. Park walked Taylor down the green-papered hall to the upstairs sitting room. She did not walk her in. She opened the door, stepped aside, and closed it behind her. Madame Kang Hae-rim was alone, in the high-backed chair by the window, in a fresh navy hanbok with a small white crane embroidered at the breast. Her pearls were 3 strands. Her jade ring was on her right hand. On the lacquer table at her elbow sat a celadon tea service for 2, a small dish of barley sugar, steam curling into the slanted morning light. She did not stand. She looked at Taylor in the doorway for one long moment, head to foot, without rushing the look and without softening it. Then she lifted her right hand from her lap, palm up, and gestured to the chair opposite her. Sit down, Miss Harrison, she said. We are going to talk. Taylor walked across the carpet in cream leather shoes that did not quite belong to her, and sat down. Her back stayed straight. Her hands stayed in her lap. Madame Kang poured the tea herself. This was a small thing. It should not have been a large thing. But in the house Taylor had worked in for 14 months, the women of the Kang family did not pour their own tea, and they did not pour for the help. Madame Kang poured 1 cup of pale gold barley tea and set it carefully on the table in front of Taylor. Then she poured a 2nd cup for herself. Then she set the pot down. "Drink," she said. "You did not eat breakfast. How do you—" Mrs. Choi reports. She always reports. "Drink." Taylor lifted the cup. The barley tea was warm and faintly sweet, and it touched the dry stone at the back of her throat and softened it. Madame Kang watched her drink. She did not drink her own tea yet. "Miss Harrison," she said, "I am going to tell you 3 things. I am going to tell you them once. I am not going to repeat myself. After I am finished, you are going to choose." "Yes, ma'am." "First." Madame Kang folded her hands one over the other on her lap. "My son did not learn your name last night." Taylor's grip on the Celadon cup did not tighten, but the muscles in her wrist remembered how to hold it. "He learned your name 11 months ago," Madame Kang said. "From me. He had asked who the new girl on the morning service was, the one who had stopped the head footman from striking the kitchen boy. I said her name is Taylor Harrison. She is 24. American. Her mother cleans hotels in Queens. My son said your name back to me as if he were learning a word in a new language. And then he said thank you, mother, and he was late to his meeting." Taylor set the cup down very carefully on the lacquer table. Her hand did not shake. She willed it not to shake. "He has said your name," Madame Kang said. "In this house, in my hearing, 11 times since then. He is not a careless man. Once when he asked the chef to let the pastry boy take an afternoon off because his mother was sick, the way Miss Harrison would have done it, he said. Once when he told the head footman that any man who raised his voice to a woman on the staff would be looking for work by week's end. The way Miss Harrison should never have had to do it for him. 9 other times. Small times. I do not eavesdrop. I am his mother. I hear." Taylor's eyes burned. Once. Hard. She did not let them spill. "That is the first thing," Madame Kang said. "He has known your name for almost a year. He has not touched you. He has not spoken to you alone. He has not, until last night, allowed you to see that he saw you. He is not a perfect man, but on the question of you, he has been, until last night, a more careful one than most. I want you to know that." "Yes, ma'am." Second, Madame Kang lifted her own cup at last. She did not drink. She held it. What happened in the ballroom last night was not honorable. Taylor's mouth opened. Madame Kang lifted her free hand, palm down, 2 inches. Taylor's mouth closed. "Let me finish, child. What happened in the ballroom was not honorable. On his side, he had drunk too much. He had been pushed too far. He made a vow in public to a crowd of people who were laughing, and he made it about a kind of woman, in the abstract, when he had already, for almost a year, been thinking about one woman, in the specific. That was not fair, not to the crowd, not to Miss Han, and not, most of all, to you." Taylor watched her face. "You did not deserve," Madame Kang said, "to be the answer to a drunk man's joke. You deserved, if anything, to be the question he had to ask himself sober." She set the cup back down. "That is why he is at the gym this morning," she said. "He went at 7. He has been there 4 hours. He is sweating last night out of his body. He will come home at 1. He will shower. He will eat. He will come and find you in the library at 2 o'clock. He will ask you, sober, what he asked you drunk. You will be free, at that point, to give him whatever answer you choose. If your answer is no, this conversation between you and me ends here. You go back to your uniform tomorrow morning. No one in this house will say one word to you about last night, and I will personally see that the next time my son hosts a party in this house, you are scheduled to have the night off." "That is my word." Taylor's throat moved once. "And if it is yes," she said. The word was small. "Then," Madame Kang said, "we come to the third thing." She lifted her cup again. This time she drank. She put the cup down. "If your answer is yes," she said, "you will not be his secret. You will not be his weekend. You will not be a story he tells his friends at the club to make them laugh harder than they laughed last night. You will walk down the main staircase of this house at 1 o'clock this afternoon in the dress I have given you, in front of every guest who slept here last night, including Miss Han, and you will let them see you. And from this afternoon on, you are not staff in this house. You are a guest. You sleep in the blue suite on the second floor. You eat at the table. You take your meals when we take ours. You wear what suits you. You answer to no one but yourself. She paused. And in return, she said, I am going to ask you for 3 things. Taylor waited. 1, you will not let him spend money on you for 30 days. Not jewelry, not cars, not apartments, not closets full of dresses. The clothes you wear in this house for the next 30 days will come from my closet, not from his bank. If, after 30 days, you still want to be here, you and he can argue about money like any 2 adults, and I will stay out of it. But for 30 days, you owe him nothing, and he buys you nothing. Do you understand why? Yes, ma'am. Say it. Because if he buys me first, the rest of the city will only see what he paid. Madame Kang's mouth did not smile. Her eyes did, faintly, once. 2, she said. You will not, in this house, in the next 30 days, be made to do anything you would not have done in your own mother's kitchen. Not in his bed. Not in any bed. He will respect that, because if he does not, he answers to me, and he knows it. You will tell me, directly, if at any point in the next 30 days that line is crossed by anyone in this family or any guest of this family, including him, including me. Do you understand that as well? Yes, ma'am. 3, Madame Kang's voice dropped a fraction. You will not lie to me about anything, ever. If you stop wanting to be here, you will say it to me before you say it to him. If he disappoints you, you will say it to me before you say it to your mother. If you find in 3 months or 3 years that this house is too heavy for you to carry, you will tell me, and I will help you put it down. I will not help him keep you. I will help you go. That is my word also. She lifted the celadon pot and refilled Taylor's cup without asking. That is the bargain, she said. Those are the 3 things. You may take 5 minutes to decide. You may take an hour. You may take until 2 o'clock, when he comes to the library, and tell me through him. The dress is yours either way. The earrings are yours either way. The bracelet, I want back if the answer is no. It is older than I am. Taylor sat in the slipper chair in the ivory dress with her grandmother's pearls in her ears and a stranger's gold bracelet on her wrist and a celadon cup of barley tea cooling under her hand, and she looked across the small lacquer table at the woman who had just rearranged, in 9 careful minutes, every assumption she had walked into the room with. She did not need 5 minutes. She did not need 1. Madame Kang. Yes, Miss Harrison. 3 questions, then I'll answer. Ask them. If I say yes today, and at 2 o'clock he asks me himself, and I say yes to him, and then 3 weeks from now, I find out he is not the man you've described to me, will you still help me put it down? I will. If I say yes today, and Miss Han, who I served champagne to last night, decides to make my life harder than it needs to be, will you stand between her and me? I will. If I say yes today, and my mother in Queens, who cleans hotels, calls me tomorrow morning and asks me what I think I'm doing, can I bring her here, into this room, and let her ask you the same questions I just asked? Madame Kang's face did. Then, the smallest thing it had done in 9 minutes. The corner of her mouth moved up, 1/4 of an inch, and stayed there. Miss Harrison, she said, you may bring your mother into this room any afternoon she is willing to come. I will pour her tea myself. Then my answer is yes, Taylor said. To you. And we will see, at 2 o'clock, what my answer is to him. Madame Kang inclined her head, once, in the small, precise nod that the Kang family used the way other families used embraces. Mrs. Park will come for you at 12:45, she said. She will walk you to the top of the main staircase. From the top of the staircase, you walk down alone. You do not look at your feet. You do not look at the carpet. You do not look at Miss Han. You look at the bottom of the staircase, where I will be standing, and you walk to me. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am. Drink your tea, child, Madame Kang said. It is going cold. Taylor drank her tea. At 12:45, Mrs. Park came for her. They walked together through the green-papered hall, down to the wide upper landing, and stopped at the top of the main staircase, behind the heavy carved newel post where the staircase was not yet visible from the foyer below. Voices rose from the foyer. The house guests who had slept in the east and west wings were gathering for the late lunch Madame Kang had announced at breakfast. There was the dry clip of Yuri Han's laugh, somewhere near the front door. There was the low murmur of two of the older businessmen by the long window. There was the small, bright clatter of porcelain from the dining room as the staff laid the final settings. Mrs. Park reached up and tucked one strand of Taylor's hair behind her ear. "You are ready, child," she said. "Mrs. Park, yes. If my knees give out on the third step, they will not. But if they do, then I will come down from the top and you will come up from the bottom, and we will meet in the middle and walk down together," Mrs. Park said. "And no one in this house will say one word about it. But they will not, Miss Harrison. They will not give out." Taylor breathed in once, all the way down to where her grandmother had always told her the breath belonged, low in the belly, behind the navel, where her mother's mother had said the women in their family kept their courage. She stepped out from behind the newel post. The foyer below was full of people in fresh daytime clothes, pale suits, soft cashmeres, low heels, and the moment her ivory sleeve caught the light from the high window, every conversation in the room frayed at the edges and went quiet, one voice at a time, not all at once. She did not look down. She kept her chin level and her eyes on the bottom of the staircase, where Madame Kang Hei-rim stood, hands folded over her hanbok, navy against the cream marble, a small white crane embroidered over her heart. Taylor put her cream leather shoe on the first step, then the second, then the third. Her knees did not give out. The thin gold bracelet on her wrist was warm against her skin. The small pearls at her ears were her grandmother's. The ivory silk skimmed her hips and did not cling to them. Somewhere below her, in the crowd, Yuri Han's dry laugh had stopped mid-syllable and not resumed. She walked down the staircase of the Kang mansion in a dress that had been chosen for her by a woman who, 12 hours earlier, had been a stranger, and she walked toward the woman who had chosen it, and she did not look at her feet, and she did not look at the carpet, and she did not look at Miss Han. At the bottom step, Madame Kang lifted one hand, palm up. Taylor placed her own hand in it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Madame Kang said, in the calm voice that the family used at funerals and at New Year, the voice that did not need to be raised because the room had already gone still for it. "This is Miss Taylor Harrison. She is my guest in this house from today. I trust each of you will make her welcome." No one in the foyer answered. No one in the foyer needed to. At 1:58, Mrs. Park came to the door of the blue sitting room on the second floor, where Taylor had been settled with a glass of water and the windows open onto the back garden, and she said, very quietly, "Miss Harrison, he is in the library. He has been there since 1:40. Taylor stood. She walked, in the ivory dress, down the corridor to the library at the end of the hall. The door was open 4 inches. She pushed it the rest of the way and stepped inside. Kang So-jin was standing at the tall window with his back to the door. He was in a charcoal suit, fresh, no tie, the white collar open at the throat the way he wore it on weekdays, the black dragon tattoo just visible at the side of his neck against the white shirt. His hair was still damp at the ends from the shower. He was holding nothing, no glass, no phone. His hands were at his sides. He turned when he heard her shoes on the wood. He saw her in the ivory dress, and for one long second he did not move at all. His face did not do what men's faces usually did in this house when they were surprised. It did something quieter. It went very still, and the muscle at the corner of his jaw moved once, and his shoulders, which had been set, dropped 1/2 inch. "Miss Harrison," he said. "Mr. Kang, my mother chose the dress." "She did. It suits you. It is hers. From when she was younger." "I know. I recognize it. I have a photograph of her in it from before I was born." He did not move closer. He stayed at the window. She stayed at the door. "I came to ask you something," he said. "I know. Sober. I see that. Without a ballroom." "Yes. Without vodka." "Yes. And without," he said, and he glanced once at the open door behind her. "An audience. Close it if you'd like." He crossed the room. He closed the library door, gently, with the flat of his hand. He turned the small brass key in the lock a quarter turn, so that the latch caught, and then he turned it back. He did not lock her in. He showed her that he could have, and that he had not. He walked back to the window. He did not touch her on the way past. He did not stand closer than 4 feet from her. "Taylor Harrison," he said. "Yes. Last night I made a vow in a room full of people who did not deserve to hear it, about a woman I had been thinking about for almost a year, whose name I learned from my mother, and whose face I had not earned the right to look at directly until you stopped my hand on the staircase with one word." She did not speak. The silence between them was not empty. It was a held breath, the kind that fills a room before a verdict. Seo-jin watched her face the way a man watches the first crack of light at the end of a long night. He did not move closer. He let the truth settle on the floor between them, like a coat dropped on purpose. Taylor lowered her eyes, not in retreat, in thought. Her hands loosened at her waist. The avental had a faint wrinkle from the long hours of the gala, and she smoothed it once, slow, the way a woman smooths her own pulse back into rhythm. "Almost a year," she said. "Almost a year. You watched, I watched, and you never said one word." "No." "Why?" He took a step back, gave her air. The library lamp threw a warm circle on the rug. Outside the door, the corridor was still. Somewhere downstairs, a clock struck 3, slow chimes that fell into the carpet like soft coins. "Because a man with my name can ruin a woman's life by simply noticing her in public," he said. "I did not want to be the boss who noticed the maid. I wanted to earn the right to know your name from your own mouth, not from a payroll sheet. You learned it from your mother. From the wrong mouth. I am trying to fix that tonight." Taylor lifted her chin. The light caught the small pearl in her ear and made it glow once, briefly, like a tiny moon. She looked at him the way she had looked at him on the staircase. No flinching. "Then say it." "Say what?" "My name." "From your own mouth, not from hers, not from the room, from you." Seo-jin breathed in. The Kang's signet ring on his right pinky caught the lamp. He spoke her name the way a man returns a stolen thing to its rightful owner. "Taylor Harrison." Again. "Taylor." One more time. Slower. "Taylor." Something in her shoulders dropped, the way a door drops the last inch onto its frame and finally locks. She did not smile. She nodded once, the small nod of a woman who has received a payment she was owed for a long time. "You may sit down, Seo-jin." He sat, not on the leather chair. On the low ottoman by the fire, knees apart, elbows on his thighs, hands clasped, the posture of a man at confession. Taylor sat too, on the chair, higher than him. She did not do it by accident. "Tell me the rest, all of it, the parts your mother does not know," he told her. About the first morning he had seen her in the breakfast room, how she had refilled his coffee without him asking and walked away without expecting a tip. About the afternoon in the garden when she had stayed 3 minutes longer than her route required, just to ask the old gardener how his knee was doing. About the cook with the sick son, and how he had stood in the pantry doorway and watched Taylor refuse to let the woman thank anyone publicly, watched Taylor say, "The house took care of it, finish your soup," in a voice that closed the subject like a hand closing a book. "I left the envelope. You closed the conversation. We were partners that day and you did not know it. I knew somebody good had done something quiet. I assumed it was the head of staff. I assumed wrong on purpose. It is safer to assume wrong in this house. Why? Because hope in a house like this is a tax. I have been paying that tax to other houses since I was 19. I came here 3 years ago and I told myself, no more hope. Do the work, take the check, send my brother to school, sleep at night." "Your brother?" "Marcus, 14. He lives with my aunt in Newark. He is the reason I wear this uniform without breaking it over my knee. He wants to be an engineer. He will be one." Seo-jin's jaw moved. He lifted his hand from his knee and held it open between them, palm up, in the air. Not a grab, a platform, an offer of a place to put something down. Taylor did not take it. Not yet. "I noticed you too." His head came up. "The morning you fired the head of security in front of the whole staff because he had grabbed Maria's wrist in the hallway. You fired him in front of us on purpose, so every woman in this house would know what the rule was. You waited until the whole room was watching before you spoke. You wanted the lesson, not the punishment. That was the day I stopped assuming wrong. That was the day I started assuming you were dangerous in a different way. Dangerous how? Dangerous because you could become the kind of man a woman like me convinces herself it is okay to want. I could not afford to want anyone in this house, so I put you in a drawer and I closed it. For almost a year, and tonight you opened the drawer in front of 300 people without asking me. You put my name in your mother's mouth before you put it in mine. You made me a story before you made me a question. That is the part I am still angry about. I know. Say it back. So I know you heard. I made you a story before I made you a question. I owe you the question. I have not asked it yet. Then ask it. Sober. Now. No room. No vodka. No mother. No Yuri Han at the bottom of the stairs in a dress the color of a wound. Ask. He stood from the ottoman. He did not cross the rug. He stayed on his side of the lamp. Taylor Harrison, will you let me try? Not marry, not own, not parade, try. Will you let me come back tomorrow morning, sober, in a clean shirt, with nothing in my pocket but a question, and ask you to spend one afternoon walking with me in a park where nobody in this house can see us? She looked at him for a long time. The fire moved. Yes. Yes? One afternoon. Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. You will pick me up at the side gate, not the front, because I am still on payroll until I am not, and I will not walk out the front door in a coat you bought. You will be sober. On time. No driver. You will drive a car that does not have your last name on the license plate. I will tomorrow. Now go to bed, Sojin. The sun comes up in 3 hours, and I want you to look like a man tomorrow, not a hangover in a suit. He laughed. It surprised him. It surprised her, too. He bowed his head once, the small bow a Kang man gives to a woman whose opinion has just become more expensive than his mother's. Good night, Taylor. Good night, Sojin. He walked to the door. He did not turn around. Now may I? May you what? Kiss you. Once. Closed mouth. On the corner of the lip. Because I have been thinking about it for almost a year and I do not want to think about it for one more night. She stood from the chair. She walked across the rug. The walk was slow on purpose. She stopped close enough that he could see the freckle under her left eye that the powder had not covered. She tilted her face up. Once. Closed mouth. Corner of the lip. Then you go to bed and you do not come back through this door tonight. He bent. He kissed the corner of her mouth. It was not a small kiss. It was a careful one. There is a difference. He held it for 2 heartbeats. He stepped back. He looked at her once, the look of a man memorizing a door he is allowed to knock on tomorrow, and he left. The door clicked shut. Taylor stood alone in the library. The fire had burned to coals. She walked to the chair. She sat. She put her hands flat on her knees. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She breathed. In through the nose for 4, out through the mouth for 6, the way her mother had taught her at 14 the night their landlord had raised the rent for the 3rd time in a year. The world cannot move you if your breath does not move you first. Morning came. She woke at 6, washed her face, braided her hair tight, put on the fresh uniform. She went down to the kitchen and did her shift. She did not look at the staircase. She worked. At 11, Madame Kang Hae Rim sent word through the head housekeeper that Taylor was not to work the afternoon. Taylor said yes, ma'am, and went back to polishing the silver. At 12:45, she went up, washed her face again, took off the uniform, and stood in front of the small closet that held the 3 civilian dresses she owned. She picked the green one, cotton, knee-length. A dress her aunt had given her on her 22nd birthday. Small gold hoops, not the pearls. The pearls belonged to the uniform. The hoops belonged to her. She walked down the back staircase at 1:55. The side gate was unlocked. A black sedan was parked across the street. Plain. No driver. No vanity plates. Seo-jin sat behind the wheel in a navy sweater. Jeans. No watch. No signet ring on his pinky. He had taken it off. He saw her in the side mirror, and he got out and walked around the front of the car and opened the passenger door himself. He smiled small. A small smile is harder to fake. 2 o'clock. 1:59. You are early. Good. He took her to a small park in Brooklyn she had never been to. They walked side by side at the same pace, 2 people trying to learn each other's stride. He asked her about Marcus. She told him. He did not offer to pay for engineering school. She watched him not offer, and she gave him a private grade in her head. He passed. He told her about his father, who had died when Seo-jin was 19, and about the year after when his mother had pulled him out of his own life and into the family business and had not asked him if he wanted it. She listened. She did not offer to forgive him for the gala vow. She watched him not ask for forgiveness yet, and she graded him again. He passed again. They sat on a bench and ate from a paper bag of roasted nuts he had bought from a vendor for $3. A small girl on a tricycle rode past and waved. Taylor waved back. Seo-jin watched Taylor wave at the small girl, and his face did something he did not realize his face had done. Taylor saw it. She did not say anything. At 4:30, he stopped the car a block from the side gate, not at the gate itself, because he understood without being told that she did not want the staff to see her get out of his car. She liked that he understood. She did not tell him. She got out. She bent down before she closed the door. Tomorrow, same time, same gate, different park. You pick. Do not pick a place that costs more than $10 to enter. I am testing you. She walked to the gate. She did not look back. There is a kind of power in not turning around. That night, after the house went to sleep, Hayrim sent for Taylor. Not to the library. To the small sitting room off the master bedroom. The room nobody but family entered. Hayrim was on the small sofa in a soft gray robe. The hanbok was gone. The pearls were on the side table. The face without the lipstick was older and softer and more honest. Sit, Taylor sat. Did he behave today? Yes. Did he pay for everything? He bought roasted nuts. $3. I let him. Good. The next one he should not pay for. Let him learn what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a small generosity from a woman who works for her money. He has never felt that. Hayrim looked at her a long moment. I owe you an apology, child. I have known your name for 8 months. I have watched you in this house for 3 years. I know your brother's name. I know what you send home every 2 weeks. I know the day you cried in the laundry because the news from Newark was bad, and I know the day a week later when the news got better, and you did not cry on the better day because you did not trust the better day yet. I have watched you the way a woman in my position watches a woman she suspects might one day matter to her son. I kept you in the uniform because I wanted to see if it would break you. It did not. I tested you without telling you, and that was not fair. I am sorry. Taylor sat very still. Madam Kang. Yes, I do not need your apology. I needed your respect 3 years ago, and I did not get it. What I need from you now is a different thing. Tell me, with your mouth, what you want from your son and from me. Because if you and I are going to share him, I need to know the shape of your share. Hayrim's eyes filled. They did not spill. A Kang woman does not spill. I want him to be loved by a woman who will not be afraid of me. I have made him afraid of me his whole life. He needs a woman who will tell him no in front of me and not flinch. You are that woman. I have been waiting for that woman for 10 years. I did not think she would arrive in my own house in an evental. Taylor breathed in for 4, out for 6. Thank you, Hayrim. Go to bed, child. Tomorrow he takes you to a cheaper park. Taylor stood. At the door she stopped. She did not turn around. Hayrim, if you ever test me again without telling me, I will leave this house and I will take him with me, and you will not see either of us until you remember how to ask instead of how to watch. Understood. 6 weeks passed. He took her to a different park every afternoon, then a museum that was free on Wednesdays, then a Korean grocery in Queens where he let her pick the dinner and cook it in the small kitchen of an apartment he owned that nobody in the family knew about. An apartment he had bought with his own money 4 years ago for the express purpose of not being a Kang for 1 night a week. She cooked. He chopped. He was bad at chopping. She laughed at him. He let her. He had not been laughed at by a woman who was not afraid of him since he was 11 years old. He found that he liked it a great deal. On the morning of the 7th week, he came back to the mansion at dawn from his own apartment and found Taylor already in the kitchen starting the breakfast service. He stood in the doorway in yesterday's clothes and watched her work. When she turned around with the coffee pot, she stopped. Now may I, Seo-jin? Now may you what? Properly, sober, with my mouth on yours and my hands on your face and a full minute on the clock, not 2 heartbeats in a doorway. Now may I? She set the coffee pot on the counter. She walked across the kitchen. The morning light was coming in flat through the high windows. The staff was not down yet. She put her hand on the side of his face. She felt the stubble he had not shaved in 2 days because she had told him last Tuesday she liked it. You may. He kissed her. It was the kiss of a man who had been given a key and had practiced for 6 weeks how to use it without breaking the lock. His hands on her face, her hands on his chest. The minute on the clock came and went. Upstairs, she said. My sweet. The one your mother had made up for me 2 weeks ago and that I have not slept in yet because I was waiting for you to ask. She took his hand. She led him up the back staircase. She opened the door of the suite at the end of the family wing, the one with the cream curtains and the high bed and the sitting area by the window. They went in. She closed the door. They did not undress in a rush. They sat on the small sofa by the window first. They talked until the sun was high and the house was busy 3 floors below. They talked about Marcus, about the gardener's knee, about Hayrim, about the company Taylor wanted to start one day, a training company for domestic staff in luxury homes, a company that would teach girls like her how to set a table and also how to set a boundary. He listened. He did not offer to fund her. He filed the idea in his head and decided that on a later day, when she had asked, he would offer to be one investor among many. He was learning. When the talking slowed, he stood. He took off his sweater. He sat down on the floor by the sofa, his back against it. Sofa, I will take the sofa first. You take the bed. I will not come into the bed tonight unless you come and get me. She looked at him a long time. Get up here, Seo-jin. Are you sure? Not naked, not yet. Dressed, on top of the covers, holding my hand, like a choice, not a claim. He got up. He lay on top of the covers in his t-shirt and his jeans. She lay down in her green cotton dress. She turned on her side. He turned on his side. They faced each other. He took her hand. The Kang signet ring was not on his pinky. He had stopped wearing it weeks ago without telling her. Where is the ring? In the drawer. Because when I touch your face, I want to touch it with a hand that belongs only to me. The hand my mother made. Not the hand my name made. She closed her eyes. She squeezed his hand once. They slept on top of the covers in their clothes for 4 hours, hand in hand. The door opened at noon. Madame Kang Hae-rim stood in the doorway. She had the morning paper folded under her arm and a cup of tea in her other hand. She did not flinch. She walked in. She set the tea down on the small table. She walked to the foot of the bed. You are both dressed. Yes, mother. On top of the covers. Yes. Holding hands. Yes. Hiram nodded once. Slow. Approving. Good. Stay that way for as long as you can. There is no rush in this house anymore. The rush was mine and I have put it down. Seo-jin, be man enough to respect her. Be man enough that the day she lets you pass the cotton dress, you will have earned it and you will not need a room of 300 people to confirm it for you. Do you understand? Yes, mother. Taylor. Be woman enough to leave him the day he stops earning it. A woman who cannot leave is not a wife. She is a hostage. I was a hostage for 31 years to a man who was good, but not good enough to be left. Do not be that. Promise me. I promise. Breakfast is in 20 minutes. Yuri-han is downstairs. She arrived uninvited. I am giving you both the courtesy of dressing properly and coming down to do it with me. Together. The 3 of us. We are willing. Hayrim turned. She closed the door behind her. She did not slam it. She closed it the way a woman closes the cover of a book she has finished reading. 20 minutes later, Seo-jin in a fresh white shirt and gray trousers, Taylor in the green cotton dress and the small gold hoops, walked down the main staircase together. Not arm in arm, side by side, the same pace. Yuri-han was in the breakfast room. She wore white. She had chosen white on purpose. She turned when they came in. Her face arranged itself into the smile she had practiced in the car. Seo-jin, darling, I heard the most ridiculous rumor. It is not a rumor, Yuri. What is not? Taylor, standing next to me, in this room, is not a rumor. She is the woman I am asking, publicly, in this house, in front of my mother, to allow me to court properly. Beginning today, out loud, with her name on my mouth and not on a payroll sheet. Yuri's face cracked. She put it back together fast. Not fast enough. Court. The maid. Hayrim, at the head of the table, set down her teacup. The cup made a sound against the saucer like a small bell, ringing a small verdict. Yuri, in this house we do not use the word maid for a woman standing in this room as a guest. We use her name. Taylor Harrison. You will use it for the rest of this conversation, or you will leave. Choose. Yuri's eyes went from Hayrim to Seojin to Taylor. She studied Taylor for a full 3 seconds. She looked for the seam. She did not find one. Taylor, Yuri said. The word came out like a coin she did not want to spend. Yuri, Taylor said. The word came out like change being returned. I will leave. That is your choice. The door is the same one you came through. Mind the step. Yuri walked out. The heels of her white shoes made small, angry sounds on the marble of the foyer. The front door closed. Seojin turned to Taylor. He went down on one knee in the middle of the breakfast room, in front of his mother, in front of the morning light coming through the tall windows. Taylor Harrison, I am asking, sober, standing on my own name, without vodka, without a vow shouted at a room, without my mother arranging it, without a ring, because I have not earned the right to put one on your hand yet. Will you let me court you, publicly, until you decide if I am worth a yes that means more than the no you gave me on the staircase? Taylor looked down at him. Stand up, Seojin. He stood. Yes, with conditions. Name them. 1. I keep working. Not as a maid in this house. That part is over. But I keep working. I will not be supported. I will be partnered. Yes. 2. The company. I want to build it. I want your help the way I would take any investor's help. You will not own more than 15%. You will not sit on the board. You will be a check and a name and a phone call I make when I am stuck. Not a boss, an investor. 1 of 3. I will find the other 2 myself. Yes. 3. Marcus, he stays with my aunt until he wants to come live closer. When he comes to a place I have chosen and paid for at least half. Not a wing of this house. A home. Yes. 4. If I say no to you again, ever, you do not punish me. You do not pout. You ask why. You listen. You go away if I ask you to go away. You come back when I say come back, not before. Yes. And what if I say no to you next time? What if 6 months from today I look at you across this same table and I say no, Seojin, this is not working anymore. What then? He thought. He did not rush. Then I will keep trying to deserve the yes. I will not chase. I will not bargain. I will go back to my own life, and I will keep working on the man you said no to, until either you decide the work was enough, or you decide it was not. And either way, I will respect the answer. Because the no you gave me on that staircase taught me that a no from you is the most honest thing anyone in this house has ever said to me. I am not going to spend the rest of my life trying to talk you out of an honest thing. I am going to spend it trying to be worth the honest thing on the other side of it. Taylor smiled. It was the smile she had given the small girl on the tricycle in the park 6 weeks ago. Wide, real, the teeth showing, no part of it rehearsed. Then yes, we start today, publicly, out loud. Hayrim is the witness. The breakfast is the ceremony. The tea is the wine. Sit down, both of us. Eat. They sat. Hayrim poured the tea. The 3 of them ate breakfast in the room where Taylor had served 1,000 breakfasts she had never been invited to eat. The eggs were warm. The coffee was strong. The light moved slowly across the table the way light moves when a house has finally stopped holding its breath. Outside, in the long garden behind the mansion, the gardener with the bad knee was kneeling in the rose bed. He looked up at the breakfast room window. He saw 3 figures at the table. He saw the maid he had known for 3 years sitting where the heiress should have been sitting. He nodded once to himself, the small nod of an old man who has lived long enough to see a house correct itself, and he went back to his roses. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever served in a room full of people who refused to learn your name and still kept your dignity intact? Have you ever told a powerful man no, knowing the word could cost you everything, and said it anyway? And when love finally arrived sober and asking permission, did you have the courage to answer yes on your own terms? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, honesty, and love earned on equal ground, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel